I've been on a mission the last couple of months to uncover the world government's darkest secrets. The colossal gates of justice, the sunken underwater prison Impel Down, the 4 giant bridges that have been built around the One Piece world, and of course, the holy capital of Marijois on top of the Red Line. Some of the strangest and most ancient megastructures in One Piece. And not only do they reveal a lot about the world government's true intentions in history and Imu's plan to shape the world in their own view, but I think I might have also found a ton of other secrets about One Piece's past, like in the First and Second World and the Void Century. So without further ado, let's dive in, starting with Impel Down. You ever stop to think how Impel Down makes absolutely no sense, like architecturally, physically, romantically? Well, maybe not that last one, but what if I told you it's all because Impel Down might actually be an ancient tower built long before the flooding of the world in order to slay the gods, steal their power, and its true purpose might actually reveal to us one of the biggest questions in all of One Piece: the location of Laugh Tale itself. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Or I guess maybe you did based on the thumbnail and title. I hope so. But seriously, I've been hung up on this specifically for quite a while, and I think I might have just made a breakthrough. Not by myself, of course. Shout out to Reddit and my team who helped craft this into a solid theory, but the more I look at Impel Down, the more I realize, this thing could not have been built anytime in the modern era. Like, how in the world would you even begin to construct this thing from the sea floor up and then drain everything around it? It's technically possible, I guess, with the fishmen and all, but it's also in the calm belt surrounded by the Sea Kings. However, now we do know that there used to be a civilization way before the current world. There were more than one, at least 2. And both of these were flooded at some point in history, which made it very clear to me that Impel Down, of course, makes now way more sense as an ancient tower building instead of a somewhat recent development that kind of, again, doesn't really make sense. And I'm actually gonna go a step further and confidently say that this tower probably isn't a product even of Joy Boy's era, the Second World, and better yet, it couldn't be based on everything we've gotten revealed about it, so I think it's even older, much older, like your mom, and it's from the First World, the era of Nika. Sorry about that one. After all, we did learn through Vegapunk, the Wano arc, and if you want to go even further back during Jinbei's cover story, that there is a ruined big civilization or civilizations at the bottom of the current ocean. And it ain't your mama's civilization either. This place was hella advanced. Now, based on the mural from chapter 1138, you know, the one that looks like a cosmic fever dream painted by a god who was on acid and also on mushrooms, we can pretty confidently place those ruins, and by association Impel Down, that they're either from the first or second One Piece world, at least 800 years old, right? It just makes way too much sense considering it's a skyscraper underneath the damn ocean. And to prove that, we're gonna take a trip through hell itself, and then I'm gonna scoot us back up all the way Gurren Lagann style, since I believe this tower once actually pierced the heavens itself. And what made me realize this was the actual design and architecture of Impel Down as a structure, because both inside and out, it's not just a cool prison where you can torture people, it's not that random. Oda pulled some pretty famous myths, stories, and legends to create this thing, and those origins, I think, reveal its mythological architecture too, you know, the role that it has in the story. And once you see those blueprints, they'll be burned into the back of your eyeballs as if you were staring at the sun itself. So let's start with the single, probably most obvious and well-known comparison, which is Dante's Inferno. In Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, we get the first iconic portrayal of the 9 circles of hell, each one representing a deeper level of sin, punishment, and despair. It's fiery, chaotic, and actually weirdly bureaucratic now that I read a little bit more into it. The place is basically the HR department for the devil. Very odd and very fun, but in his story, hell is broken down into 9 distinct levels, which are as follows. Limbo is the first circle, and it ain't a fun game where you climb under a bar. Limbo's punishment is actually eternal separation from God, though they are not directly tormented. The second circle is where souls are swept endlessly by a violent dark storm. The third circle is gluttony, where poor souls are tormented by freezing rain and mud in foul-smelling mires. Kinda like a swamp, but way worse since it smells like a butthole. Then in the fourth circle, greed, souls are forced to push heavy boulders against each other in a constant feudal struggle. Very Sisyphus-like, Sisyphus-esque, I guess. Anyways, by God, I think. Then this is followed by the fifth circle, wrath, where souls are trapped in the muddy waters of the river Styx, fighting each other in anger. And I mean, I would be pretty angry if I was stuck eternally in muddy waters. After that, we've got floor 6, hearsay, where souls are trapped in flaming tombs. Big lucky number 7 is violence, where various punishments take place, such as being boiled in a river of blood or being on a burning plain of sand under a fiery rain. Though I will say, if I'm being boiled alive, it doesn't really matter to me if it's blood or water, but I guess, you know, stylistically, it's a touch, I think. Anyone who doesn't do their taxes goes to circle 8, fraud, full of a bunch of mini rings that each punish a different type of fraud, and at the darkest, deepest depth is treachery, the 9th circle of hell, and this is the lowest and most severe circle, where souls are frozen in a lake of ice and big man Satan is at the center. Now, this was a lot of exposition, and you might wonder, was this even relevant, Manu? Because Impel Down doesn't even have 9 circles, it has 6 floors, or 7 if you're counting newcomer land. But numbers are just really numbers here. Not everything needs to line up perfectly with the math. It's really all about the themes, obviously. If you look into it a little harder, okay, perfect, thank you. You got it. Then we can actually see that the naming scheme and punishment system are pretty much identical. We've got level 1, Crimson Hell, level 2, Wild Beast Hell, level 3, Starvation Hell, Burning Hell, Freezing Hell, and finally level 6, Eternal Hell. And I gotta say, that's kind of my favorite tier, honestly, since it's got the most badass name, and it's specifically the place where even the world government pretends that the prisoners don't even exist, like I do with all my haters. So as you can see, all these hells do line up, and the building structure of descending tiers is taken straight from that idea. And as you can see, this stuff isn't exactly subtle. Oda stealing Dante's jam bar for bar, and I'm pretty cool with it since Impel Down freaking rips. One of my all-time favorite arcs in the story. But what is much more important for today's video is that the prison itself seems to perfectly match Imu's whole, well, kind of everything, really. The shadowy ruler who lurks in darkness, controls minds, manipulates fate, and radiates "give me your soul, here's a golden fiddle" type of energy thing, you know? Imu's horns, wings, shadowy figure, all of it screams fallen angel. And based on how they interact with Zebek during God Valley, I really think it's pretty clear that Imu was a being who once reached towards godhood, but was forced to rule through fear instead. Like, you know, literally eternal hell being a place where people's histories being erased. That's kind of Imu's bread and butter move. It's called the Void Century and Ohara, by the way. Plus, let's not forget that Imu's pretty recently deleted Lucia Kingdom, obviously. Then we have Frozen Hell, which, excuse me, we're talking about a guy who was introduced with their big walk-in head freezer. And you can pretty much tie in every single one of the layers of Impel Down to a method that Imu uses to mess with people. I mean, come on, even Impel Down's weak-bowed warden plays into this sort of symbolism because his design isn't just big guy with poison powers. He's a big guy with poison powers that rules hell with his horns and wings and demon-like tail. I think that Magellan might even be Imu's biggest fan, low-key, if he knows about the Big King. Also, quick side note, with that in mind, kinda wonder if he's related to that big Yeti-looking Holy Knight at all that we got recently here, right? Could explain his insane power, and also the designs are kind of giving me Goth Sun a little bit. But sorry, I got ahead of myself here. What I really want you to take away from this section is that currently, Impel Down mirrors Imu's current position in the world as a great devilish being. This is their hellish prison, but I don't always think that Impel Down was supposed to be that. And to really understand what I'm getting at here and why I think it's a tower meant to slay gods, we do have to climb all the way back up, because while Dante's Inferno describes the descent, the Tower of Babel myth actually explains the true purpose of Impel Down, I think. Now, the Tower of Babel, or Babel, Tower of Babel, I'm gonna say, is one of the oldest and of course most iconic stories in human mythology, dating at least all the way back to good old Mesopotamia. So you know, it's gonna be Fertile Crescent time, yo, and since it's possible that you've never heard about it, let me sum it up for you real quick here. It goes something like this. Humanity, united under one common language, decided to build a tower so tall it would reach heaven itself. The purpose was to rank amongst the gods, an ascent to divinity itself, but capital G God, in his divine oh hell nah attitude, struck them down and scattered them across the entire world, which is kind of supposed to be the origin of people having different languages all across the world. Now, does that sound at all familiar? Well, probably if you watch a little bit more of my content or are a little lore junkie freak like I am, but this is just exactly how the Harley text describes the first One Piece world. It's an absolute era of hubris where humanity got way too advanced and way too greedy and tried to touch the Forbidden Sun. Their ambition reached way too far, and after the enslaved people of the world started praying, Nika showed up to whoop some butt. The parallel is really almost perfect, and the picture to me at least seems to be pretty clear. Emu or some other ancient king built Impel Down up as a tower to tap into the Forbidden Sun and then kind of fumbled the ball a little bit when the slaves that they gathered rebelled, praying to Nika. Now this made it pretty clear that Oda was really pulling from this very story, and so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper here and see if maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit more sneaky hidden lore in the story of Babel. So let me babble a little bit here. Also, cut me some slack. I just love pushing my Bible piece agenda. I do know that Oda loves that stuff, so I like digging into mythology and stuff. And I did find a little bit of a nugget that actually got me very excited, kind of digging more into this overall idea. And no, it's not a Chick McNugget, no matter how badly I would want to have those just popping up when I look for lore, but instead all I get are these stupid lore nuggets, which kind of taste like cardboard. Now, from what I can gather, the Tower of Babel was inspired by a real existing structure, the Burj Khalifa, the Etmenaki, the Great Ziggurat of Babylon. Ziggurat is not an alien, by the way, it's another name for a temple, and this Zig's name literally means Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. Now, these two forces are, of course, everywhere in One Piece. I actually made way too big of a video on that in the big Bagua theory I dropped recently. In case you're curious, link in the description below, but for now, it's even more clear-cut since Heaven, or in this case, the Sun God and the Earth God, are the two gods from the first One Piece world, so it is really all coming up Babel now, baby. And get this, in case you're one of the haters who doubt me here, Etmenaki had 7 levels, which is exactly how many levels Impel Down has when, yes, you include Newcomer Land, which I think, is a legit level. So haha! Turns out that the math does work too. I've always said that numbers and math are very important to Oda. Ignore what I said earlier about numbers and math in One Piece. I didn't say anything. And the cherry on top here, Etmenaki wasn't just any old temple. It was a place of worship for the god Marduk. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it sounds bad as if you do. Marduk, the divine king who slayed the primordial dragon goddess Tiamat to create the world. He did this using his own serpent dragon, a symbol of order conquering chaos. And loreheads, you already know what this one means. I present to you, once again, the mural from chapter 1138, and on the right side we see what seems to be the first One Piece world. I personally do still believe that this interpretation is correct, so even if you disagree, let's just put that aside for now while you digest the theory, right? Let's hear it first. And here you've got Nika, the sun god, I think, represented as a massive dragon, and I think that it's Nika since it's fighting the giant serpent and Earth King, and the Harley text describes this battle as one between the serpent and the sun god. I really don't know how else to cut it anymore, dude. The imagery, I think, is pretty on the nose and unmistakable. I'm pretty sure that this is just Oda's retelling of this Mesopotamian ancient myth, a divine war between sun and earth, order and chaos, light and darkness. Now, Big Dog Marduk's tower was built as a monument to his power over the dragon Tiamat. But clearly that ain't the case in One Piece. I'm saying that this tower was built to rob from a god, not to honor the sun god. And so, what does that make Impel Down? Well, to me, it's pretty clear. Impel Down was the greatest tower of the original first world of One Piece, even long before Joy Boy ever was born. A structure originally maybe not built as a prison, but as a ladder to claim the Forbidden Sun itself. Imu, or maybe just some POS evil king of the Nerona family, built it in order to reach godhood. You know, so that they could actually capture the eternal flame that Nika embodied or protected. And I think that this lines up with the physical design of the building too. Again, architecturally, the top of Impel Down is very much shaped like a brazier, a sort of torch holder. I think it looks like it's quite literally built to hold fire. And if that's true, then Nika, the laughing, dancing, rubbery chaos god, wasn't just a hero, he was the destroyer of Babel. Oh, it's Babylon. Okay, that makes sense. Which actually could line up very well with Tiamat's role in the Mesopotamian myth too, but also with the giants of Elbaf saying that Nika was both a destroyer and a liberator. A terrifying power from the ancient world. The one who stopped the world itself, Imu, from taking what wasn't theirs. And regardless, the story as I see it is that humanity was trying to seize the sun itself, but then the god of freedom stops them, ironically, which leaves the world shattered. It's covered in death and darkness, which might have actually been a massive flood, and this Tower of Babel structure sinks beneath the waves. Maybe also darkness because, you know, Nika took the sun back himself, and then Imu repurposes it into the world's greatest prison, like, you know, all the great world leaders seem to do, I guess. And yet, all of these cool answers obviously raise some other very big and important questions. If this tower once was supposed to hold the Forbidden Sun, where did that power go? Like seriously, what happened to the stupid big ball of fire in the mural? We do know that Vegapunk remade it a little bit, or sort of, and feels a lot of guilt since it can flood the world, but also, you know, it's probably not as potent as the real deal. He even revealed the world was flooded, buried under 200 meters of ocean water, so why did it happen? When did it happen? And where is that freaking Mother Flame? Eternal Flame. Mother Flame is the one that Vegapunk made. Eternal Flame. Today is not my day. Anyways, can the Tower of Babel myth actually explain that too? And I think, sort of. Almost, maybe. And I did find an answer that I think you will want to hear. Because I don't think that Nika was just punishing the Earth God. I think that maybe they were containing the eternal flame itself, and the secret to that lies not in the tower, but where it's located. Let's look at my friend Tekking's favorite thing, geography. Impel Down sits at the one corner of the Triangle of Justice, alongside, of course, with Enies Lobby and Marineford. All three of these locations are connected by these massive, almost nonsensically huge gates of justice. These mysterious titanic monoliths, so huge, they look like they might belong to a completely different era altogether. And as we know, gates don't normally just happen for no reason. They normally surround something like, say, yes, an ancient giant kingdom? Okay, cards on the table. My idea here is that Nika, after stopping Imu or whoever tried to harness the Forbidden Sun's power, decided the only way to save the world was to drown it, but the ancient peoples of the world saw this coming and built the Noah to survive. And then they rebuilt society inside the gates of justice themselves. After all, we do seem to see the Noah on the first era of the mural, which means that it's way older probably than we all previously thought, and it would only exist if a massive flood had already occurred or was about to happen. And so this new civilization, the second One Piece world, was built on the first one's remains, and this would also perfectly set the stage for Joy Boy to go do whatever the hell it is that he actually did during the Void Century. A world flooded by Nika, that stuff just calls for Mr. First Pirate here to set the seas, leaving the ancient kingdom as he goes and uncovers the story of Nika and Imu. Or maybe Nika flooded the world, sealing away Imu, and then dumb as Joy Boy in true Luffy fashion accidentally unleashed Imu back on the second world, ruining the kingdom that he originally came from. That could be a twist. A kingdom that might have been led by none other than the now infamous Davy D. Jones, who, kind of probably was a former king of the world that Imu doesn't like to acknowledge. Alright, there's a lot to digest here, so let me now break it down and maybe you'll see see where I'm actually coming from, but I kind of wanted to lay it all out for you. And actually, Enies Lobby, which as you know has a pretty special place in my heart on this channel, was my first big clue. So let's talk about some holes here. Enies Lobby's pit makes to this day no physical sense, also no romantic sense. Now the water cascades into it endlessly but never really fills up apparently. That is not how holes are supposed to work in my expert hole opinion as a holologist, and a huge green flag for this theory. The island has eternal sunlight even though it's, again, geographically and physically impossible. I mean, forbidden sun? Eternal sunlight? Those things do sound like they would go hand in hand, man. There ain't no other way to cut it, really. Unless you do cut it a different way. Good for you, I guess. Let me know in the comments. But this made me wonder, what if the forbidden sun is actually above Enies Lobby itself? That could explain the permanent sunlight, but it wouldn't explain the giant island-sized hole underneath it. But you know what might explain it? If, I don't know, maybe another giant structure was originally built there by the Void Century Ancient Kingdom that was then destroyed as well by Joy Boy or the weapon Uranus, or Joy Boy using the weapon Uranus. After all, we do know that the Eternal Flame was a main power source during the Second World, so, you know, it wasn't fully gotten rid of at this point, but maybe after the Tower of Babel idea didn't work, it got actually moved, and ironically, I think it would really work well if Impel Down ended up being where Nika sealed Emu in the ancient past. And then Joy Boy, in his Luffy's curiosity, found that tower on the outskirts of his flooded civilization and accidentally unleashed Emu, who then maybe tried to reclaim the Forbidden Sun once again for themselves, and succeeded at first since the structure was already built this time around at the site of Enies Lobby. But then yes, I do hear you. What about the gaping, deep, massive hole, Manu, you holologist? And to that, I do say, dude, chill out. That is too many descriptors for the hole, and to answer you, I'd say that Joy Boy might even literally have like slam dunk shoved that whatever was formerly at Enies Lobby straight into the ground, forming the giant hole that is Enies Lobby today. Or again, more likely, he used Uranus in a desperate move to destroy it and keep Emu from re-reaching the Eternal Flame. After all, Emu used what is nearly confirmed to be Uranus to destroy Lulusia, and it does still look kinda like the exact same way, unless that hole is now closed, but it didn't look like it when we last saw it. Maybe, ironically, Emu may have gotten this idea to do this thing from Joy Boy or Davy Jones and decided to unleash it on Lulusia to get back at the Davy clan, since we do know that Idis and Teach did escape to the island. So maybe Joy Boy couldn't flood the Eternal Flame, but he could ensure that Emu couldn't access it by destroying their new tower. That way, Emu couldn't build another tower up on top of it because there is this giant big hole in it. Now, to be completely clear, I don't think that the OG Eternal Flame is just like hanging up in the sky. It's probably in space or something, maybe, but fixed in some place somehow, and that's the reason that Enies Lobby gets the eternal sunshine, or maybe connected to some of the Sky Islands things. Or maybe, as I've theorized before, it's the other way around, and deep under Enies Lobby is the eternal flame, but the water is what prevents Emu from claiming it once again. Honestly, either kind of works, only it's kind of weird that if the flame was under Enies Lobby, why would the light be coming from above? That's the only thing. But again, if the big issue was towers being built up to it, then shoving it, deep into the ground would kind of work wonders, I say. And actually, I might just double down on this idea, because not only do I think that inside those 3 gates of justice are the ancient kingdom flooded by Nika and Joy Boy, I think that Davy Jones and Laugh Tale might just be down there as well, because recently Oda's just been dropping these very subtle breadcrumbs about Davy Jones, who was an ancient king himself, and in the real world lore, Davy is a sailor cursed by the devil, trapped beneath the sea for all eternity, ruling over the lost souls of drowned men. Laugh Tale, on the other hand, is an island that's seemingly impossible to find and access, but somehow Roger did it and then laughed when he got there. So I do wonder, could the ancient kingdom be Laugh Tale? Not the first one to propose this, obviously, and is it actually sealed between these 3 gates? I really think that's a good chance, since this part of the world is still in the Grand Line, and I think it would just be incredibly hard for anyone to just casually stumble into it. Especially if part of the issue was that Emu specifically built a set of world government fortresses, the biggest ones that exist, around it. And you know what that means, everyone, right? Yes! Done Piece is back on the menu, boys. I very long thought that Laugh Tale is underwater, obviously, since it's in a very elusive place and all the Roger pirates seem to go into flood and ocean mode after they uncovered the island. Like, think about it. Rayleigh's sea bubble coating business would be key for anyone finding it. Scopper guarding the location where the story of Laugh Tale and the Void Century seems to be depicted. There's also Crocus, who quite literally lives inside a whale. I mean, it seems fairly clear that there is something underwater that's important for the Straw Hat crew to eventually find, and it's probably got something to do with the Ancient Kingdom. And since Davy D. Jones is said to be sealed down at the bottom of the ocean, cursed by the Sea Devil, maybe Davy himself is also down there on Laugh Tale. Like, seriously, like, how crazy would it be if the reason Roger laughed was because the Davy D. Jones was the one telling him the story of the Void Century directly in person, and at the same time breaking the kind of bad news that without a sun god, ain't nobody gonna stop Emu anytime soon. I personally kind of love that, honestly. It would give a whole new context for Zebek and Teach's legacy too. Actually thinking about it, the reason Roger even found Laugh Tale, if it is down there, would have been because of Zebek. Like, a small detail I think kind of goes uncovered outside of the power scaling space is that Rox specifically destroyed a Gate of Justice during his prime. Those things, as you can see here, are more than big. They're enormous and probably don't get repaired very quickly. Like, imagine all of that was his setup to head into Laugh Tale, since the gates and the walls around it would have made it impossible to reach unless the gates were opened. Oh wait, okay, is that the joke, that they are floodgates? And now it's time, I think, we talk about the 3 gates that might just actually be sealing away an ancient god, the one in his lobby, these ones right here, the Gates of Justice. Now, in case you're not familiar with the fine architecture of the world government, I got you, because we first bore witness to the Gates of Justice during Ennis Lobby, and then again during Impel Down and Marineford 2. Which makes a lot of sense because each of these 3, and I can't stress enough how crazy big they are, absurdly massive doors of steel and stone are located at one of the world government's 3 major strongholds, as you can see here on this handy little graph that Oda gave us in chapter 522. In a nutshell, simply opening one of them messes with the entire ocean, creating massive whirlpools as we learned during Ennis Lobby, and inside of them is a current that oddly seems to spin outwards, contained by the gates for the world government to use. It is crazy fast and helps them get from point A to point B in like a third of the time, if not even faster than that, basically speed traveling in between these 3 locations. So, why am I even talking about them today? Well, in the wake of God Valley ending, I've been looking back at some of the stuff from Elbaf, and recently we got a massive reveal that the Abyssal Mark has 3 stages, which really stood out to me, because immediately that pattern of 3 reminded me of the giant Gates of Justice, and then I looked more into my boy Davy D. Zebek here. You know me, I love digging deep and dirty into the lore of characters to figure out what I've been missing all along, and, well, it kinda made me realize that Zebek has a power feat that really went undetected, which was both insane and also kind of makes no sense. Because in chapter 1155, after Zebek and Harold first meet, there's a line here that got tossed out pretty casually for what it actually was. The narrator tells us that sometime later, Zebek attacked a ship with a heavenly tribute en route to Sacred Merijoa, and with this ship and money, Rox dove into the pirating business. Now, I can see that I lost you a little bit. Okay, you might be asking, what does this have to do with the gates, Manu? Well, you didn't actually let me finish, because tossed in there, strategically left out by me, sorry to build some suspense for this video, is another line. Because the box also says, not only that, Zebek destroyed the Gates of Justice and fled once again. Boom! Gates, right there. Gotcha. Alright. I remember when the chapter came out, I found this absolutely mind-boggling. Like, how did one man destroy this titanic gate bigger than entire kingdoms in the One Piece world? But what I failed to talk about and realize was, why did he even do that? Why would Zebek go out of his way to destroy one of the Gates of Justice, right? And does it tie into the Abyss marking somehow that we now know about? Because we know he wasn't trapped in it because he was leaving from the Holy Land, you know, smack-talking Emu, unless the exit a secret exit from Marija goes out into that whirlpool, but that would be kind of weird. So I think he could not really have ended up in the Tarai Current and needed to escape through a gate of justice from where he started. That kind of doesn't really pan out, I think. So again, unless there is some secret tunnel or escape that, exits you in the middle of this whirlpool, it doesn't make sense. The question then is, why did he do it? Well, one argument could be pretty simple. He did it to slow down the world government. They were probably chasing after him, but did he though? I mean, we do know that the gates can be opened and the current that they use stays contained, so why destroy it? Just to mess with Imu? I feel like there's a lot more to this than we originally thought. I feel like Oda is leaving us a massive breadcrumb that probably is only going to make sense like 100 chapters from now. Because what I think is that Xebec, with his deep knowledge of the One Piece lore, knew that these gates are containing something much older and much more powerful that would be essential to taking down Imu. Remember, they just came from that little meetup that they had where they were threatening Imu, and that way Xebec could achieve his dream of conquering the world maybe. And so I kind of began to really take a deep look at these gates for the first time because they've been bugging me for a while, and man, do they really stick out in One Piece like a sore thumb. Like seriously, when you really look at them, and I mean really look and think about them, the gates of justice don't match world government architecture, and they don't make a lot of sense in general. Here you'll see what I mean when I show it to you side by side. Look at Marija. It's sleek, it's ornate, it's clean, they use high columns and wide plazas and beautiful, intricate designs. It's incredibly fashionable, like me. And now to contrast that sleek design, let's look at the Enies Lobby Gate. It's a rough, colossal steel door with giant bolts and steel plating. I would say overall it's got a very brutal and industrial style to it, very efficiency based, right? So I would argue that these gates are architecturally not exactly modern by the great Imu-sama's current standards, but they do very much match the design of an era that we have seen before, the first world of One Piece. The mural from chapter 1138. I love you so much. You're the gift that keeps on giving. The first One Piece world, at least what we see in the mural, has this super industrial revolution style of representation. Big gears, smokestacks, and steel plating. And I say that because we do see characters like Emeth, an ancient robot from the Void Century, who are super advanced on the inside, but have this rougher outer design to them, this like sci-fi steampunk kind of vibe. And I at least very much feel like these gates do look like they're from a land lost to time itself. This ancient time where technology was so crazy they just could build these giant country-sized gates. Now, if you don't want to believe me, how about we just use some logic here for a second, man, all right? Who builds 3 massive giant gates underwater? Like, half the damn gate is below the ocean level. That's an absolute pain to build, and I don't think that the world government actually has the means to complete that, looking at, how long things are taking with the giant bridges and everything. They're not building that overnight. And it's actually pretty much the same situation as Impel Down, which is located at one of those gates. They do make way more sense being built before the world ever got flooded by 200 meters. Like, I don't know, maybe in an era we know was actually dominated by gigantic creatures. We have seen their skeletons with places like Onigashima. Forgot about that one. Or we do know that there are these giant weapons and objects around, like the sword on Elbaf, the Onigashima katana. The early world matches these gates to a T, I think. Alright, so I think you kind of get my entry point, my main point here. From this, we can now come to some very, very interesting conclusions, I think. Number one, the gates very, very likely predate the world government, meaning that they had some sort of function before the Marines ever existed. The government is maintaining or guarding a system that they inherited from the past, and someone with a really big paintbrush just slapped on the world government logo on them, being like, hey, this belongs to us, no boy. And like, world government approved. So this begs the question, if these gates are from the Void Century or even from the First World, what is Imu using them for besides slightly increased travel speeds? Which, you know, like, good for them, but that's not a reason for Oda to introduce these things. I think we can all agree. And well, I'll just spare you the trouble of building some crazy suspense this time around, because I believe that these gates are some sort of sealing mechanism. Essentially, to me, they kind of feel like a tri-lock prison containing something much older than the world government itself. And this might sound crazy at first, until we realize that, well, Imu is pretty much the type to do that exact same thing, right? Imu uses ancient tech still to this day, like the ancient weapon Uranus, probably, that Imu seemingly used to destroy Lucia. I kind of think that these gates were originally not Imu's. Maybe they were using them for a completely different purpose. But Imu then took them, painted them, repurposed them to seal away some powerful creature or beast. Something or someone that Davy D. Zebek was actually preparing to free. That's why I think he destroyed it, kinda testing out how hard it would be to take them down. But come on, right? Surely that's insane to think. Why would I think that Oda would use these 3 giant gates as a prison for something? There's definitely no real-world mythology that Oda might have been pulling from that I uncovered that would lead me to this exact conclusion, right? Well, it's Oda, so of course there is. Now, I wouldn't blame you for not realizing this at first, because Oda, you know, seemingly hit their purpose with their entire current name. Like, when you first hear the names Gates of Justice, your brain probably just leans more towards world government, the Marines' justice system and law and everything. But mythologically, well, I kinda hate to break it to you, but gates almost never represent law. Sorry, Trafalgar. Issue. The most famous mythological gates represent thresholds, the boundaries between worlds, very much like heaven or hell, right? So let's talk about those types of gates first and then see what Oda might have been cooking up here. Because as we'll see, there are a lot of these gates in mythology from all over the world. Now, and generally these divine gates protect one of 2 things. The first being paradise, like heaven, good places, you know the one you want to go to, which, wouldn't you know, lines up with Oda's naming schemes because these gates are located in Paradise. That's the name for this section of the Grand Line, right in front of the Holy Land as well. Now, through my research, one standout myth that seemed to tie him really well actually was the Enuma Elish. If you're a fan of the Fate series, you probably recognize that. It's a famous Mesopotamian myth about the hero king Gilgamesh, also known as the oldest epic in the world, but it also features a god named Shamash. And Shamash, you see, how do I put this? Well, they were the ancient sun god of justice. Yeah, they passed through 2 great gates every single day, one at the new dawn, one at dusk. I don't know, it's kind of giving Sun God and Moon Tribe from the Harley text vibes. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I don't love it because it's only 2 gates and we got 3 gates, right? But something that is very interesting is that Shamash isn't just a sun god, he's also a judge. He is justice personified. And his gates weren't just symbolic either, right? They were actual cosmic machinery regulating divine order. Now, there's a lot of stuff in Mesopotamian lore that really ties very deeply into One Piece, including massive floods, god kings, giant primordial ocean gods being the big bad guy. A lot of fun stuff. Maybe I'll make a video on just that one day. If you want to see it, let me know. Ultimately, the idea of a sun god of justice having massive divine gates did make me wonder if maybe these gates were originally Nika's. I mean, I can totally see a world where these things, clearly matching the first world's vibe, were actually built by, for, or with Nika in mind. And after Imu took over, they repurposed them for their own justice instead. Just painting on the gates of justice. But in One Piece, these gates clearly don't protect heaven at all, right? Like, well, they kind of do, but we know that One Piece's heaven is where the greatest demons actually live. Imu, the Gorosei, Charlos, mostly Charlos, and the whole gang of evil bad boys, they're all up there. So even though this first one was quite juicy, I want to move on now to the next set of mythological gates. We're just gonna keep cranking up the heat here. Something that feels way more in line with what I think these gates might actually be used for in One Piece. I did tell you already that I think that they are a 3-way sealing prison, and I'll show you why I think that next. In Hindu cosmology, the One Piece tie-ins become actually crazy hella specific. And when I say specific, I mean like a white girl Starbucks coffee order levels of specific. Yeah. In Hinduism, there are the 3 gates of liberation. Already off to a killer One Piece start here, dare I say. A warrior of liberation! Your gates are here! Well, sort of. These aren't actual physical gates this time. They are spiritual pathways that the soul passes through to escape the cycle of rebirth. They are metaphysical gates tied to enlightenment itself. And very much like good old Emu here, these gates represent the 3 concepts of emptiness, singlelessness, and wishlessness. Which to me really reminds me of the concepts of the void and the abyss and how Emu seems to want to crush people's dreams, right? I mean, Mu, the name that Emu gives themselves by the way, literally means nothingness in Japanese. It's the same kanji also as void and the void century and all these things. Same kanji that we see in the Harley text too. And they control the abyss, nothingness, and created the void century. It's all there really in black and white. Pretty clear as crystal, I think. But there is another side as well. Hinduism also has 3 gates of hell, representing destructive drives that bind the soul to suffering. Meaning that now we have 2 sets of 3 gates, each representing a spiritual threshold between liberation and imprisonment. And what are the gates of justice? Well, they are 3 gates that I believe are sealing away a mythical god, which wouldn't be insane to say since One Piece is a world obsessed with cycles, reincarnation, inherited will, ancient sins, the flowing of the ages, right, Roger stuff, and burdens carried by descendants and passed on into the future. And if you're now saying, I wish you could get even more specific on the 3 parts of this, I got you, little homie. Let Big Papa Manu show you what he's actually working with here. Let me introduce you to a little concept called tri-seals. And, you know, not seals as in the marine animal or the kiss from a rose singer. I mean like Naruto style shadow seal blah 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 no jutsu sort of seals, right? That's what we're talking about. Whenever there's an ancient myth that needs to lock away something truly catastrophic, it uses more than 1 lock, and a lot of the time, it's 3 locks. In Hindu mythology, Shiva's cosmic seals appear in triads. In Babylonian myth, the great primordial sea beast Tiamat is sealed away by the god Marduk by dividing the heavens, the earth, and the waters. A 3-fold sealing system that gives crazy One Piece vibes. And in Japanese mythology, the 3 sacred treasures act as seals protecting the imperial legitimacy and are used by the true ruler of Japan. They are also in One Piece by name through Kizaru's attacks, and the underworld god Izanami is said to block the entrance to the underworld with 3 progressive thresholds in old interpretations of Shinto mythology too. And to round us all off and pay tribute to Elbaf, where we are right now, Nordic mythology has a very famous tri-seal too, connected to a world-ended being, because Fenrir, the bringer of Ragnarok, son of Loki, is sealed away with the magic ribbon Gleipnir, a binding stone, and a sword wedged into its jaws. That is fairly metal, dude, and I love it. Let's see if we see something like that in Elbaf. So please understand that when Oda pulls from so many mythologies in his series, I don't think I'm too insane to speculate that there might be 3 gates belonging to Emu, a person obsessed with control and order and getting these tri-seal vibes instead. Which now actually brings us to the real meat and potatoes of this video. What is actually being sealed away with these gates? Is it a god? A king? A weapon? Well, it could be a lot of things, but there's one more big set of gates that Oda seems to be pulling from that makes me think that it's a character we've been hearing about since Long Ring Longland Island. Because I believe that the gates of justice are designed specifically to seal away none other than Davy Jones himself inside the abyss. And for it all to make sense, we have to break down the Greek gates of Tartarus. Tartarus, in case you didn't know, is actually not a delicious sauce that you can put on your meat, but instead the deepest abyss in the underworld, which should really catch your attention since Big Dog Emu is all about the abyss, and Tartarus is more than just a big scary abyssal pit, it's the greatest prison within the underworld. It's where the primordial titans are being sealed away by the gods, specifically the king of the titans, Kronos, father of Zeus. So we've basically got our massive bronze gates guarded by supernatural forces, ensuring ancient monsters never escape. Do you see where I'm getting with all of this, right? I hope so. I'm really doing my best here. Oda loves Greek mythology, right? You know that. We've got Uranus, named directly after a Greek primordial deity. We've got Amazon Lily, literally being the Amazons. Knight of God, Figalin Shamrock uses a Cerberus, and as the Holy Knight commander, he's Emu's biggest guard dog. So you see, when Oda needs a myth about, I don't know, an ancient monster that was sealed away by gods after a world-altering war, yeah, I think I'm not too crazy for assuming that he's pulling from the Greeks for this one as well. And this would actually line up incredibly well with the thing that started me down this entire rabbit hole first, Xebec, right? He destroyed the gate for a reason on his way out. And when you look at his plan and who he's a descendant of, I think it really all clicks together fairly nicely. Xebec is a member of the Davy clan, a descendant of Davy D. Jones, an ancient king of the One Piece world, presumably during the Void Century or the First World, the time of gods and mighty beasts. And we do know that Xebec was a mastermind trying to lay out a super big plan involving the Galela giants, 2 devil fruits, and, based on chapter 1166, Nika as well. And since Loki and Xebec's conversation made it very clear, I think, that Xebec thought that Herald could or should be Nika, we also know that based on the climax of God Valley, Emu and Davy Jones have some sort of serious ancient beef with their Tartarus sauce. And there's a promise in the Davy bloodline that Xebec needs to fulfill, failed to fulfill, and I guess now Blackbeard is gonna fulfill. So my big idea here is that it's none other than Davy D. frickin' Jones sealed away inside of the gates of justice beneath those swirling currents. Remember, we have never actually seen what is in the middle of these gates. Never. And Xebec's promise is to free his great ancestor, right? Someday the beast will be unleashed and Davy D. Jones will return to the One Piece world to help defeat Emu once and for all. At least that's what Xebec was planning on doing. Clearly he got Domi reversied and stabbed to death, but hey, it's the thought that counts. Surely his son will finish the job though, right? I mean, Blackbeard has the Earthquake Fruit to destroy the gates, and then also the, Darkness Fruit to maybe stop the Whirlpool with his gravity shenanigans, because that's at least where I think that Oda's taking the story in. If Davy D. Jones is sealed away inside the gates of justice, his descendant will have to free him. Blackbeard seems to carry the will of Xebec, and I'm very confident that if any of this is actually true, he's probably gonna play a massive part in doing that. Either him or Loki will, since he's the other person who seems to carry Xebec's will. Personally, I'm kind of on Team Loki just because I think he's pretty cool and awesome, and seeing him break down those gates with his big bad hammer Ragnir would be pretty hype. I'd be down for that, but Earthquake Fruit works as well. Either way, the biggest reason that I actually think that it's Davy sealed down there is, well, it's his name. In our real world's mythology and One Piece mythology, Davy Jones is the Spectre of the Deep, a demonic figure that punishes pirates, dragging them down to Davy Jones' locker, aka the abyss of the ocean floor. So what if that's what these gates are actually sealing away? They could be the 3 literal seals that Emu based their abyss markers on as well. I mean, we do know that there are 3 stages to the markings given to the Holy Knights that represent the abyss, and this would tie imperfectly to these 3 gates. 3 massive gates sealing away the full power of the abyss, tying into all that weird petty nonsense that Emu seems to have with Davy Jones, and that's why the tier system for the Holy Knights might also be in 3 seals of the abyss that can unlock, very similar to the giant 3 seals of the abyss on the gates of justice. Maybe each level of the Holy Knight seals, the surface, the deep sea, and the seafloor pacts are actually tied to Davy himself, sealed inside of these gates. And really, when you think about it, it does line up pretty well, right? I mean, Blackbeard having the Darkness Fruit, it's a literal abyss of power, which could be just like his ancestors' true power too. For all we know, Davy D. Jones might just be the god of the abyss, and Imu's just sort of just stealing his thunder right now. I mean, Imu's clearly a body snatcher and a power borer, so maybe they do this at a much larger scale as well. Wouldn't be the first time Oda is foreshadowing something like that in a smaller way first. It also would explain why Imu placed the world government biggest strongholds around these three gates. In many mythologies, demons or primordial beings are sealed beneath mountains like Kronos. They're also often sealed beneath oceans like Tiamat, or beneath giant structures like the Japanese Oni sealed under temples. And don't tell anyone, but I actually have my own demon sealed away inside of the Ohara Patreon. I buried him beneath a bunch of exclusive premium content and even some free stuff like the opinion piece, a weekly One Piece newsletter. Check it out, but don't unleash the demon god I have sealed away there, because, come on, no one wants that. But for reals though, what is sealed below the entire military might of the world government? The Abyss and Davy Jones, the ancient king of the world, stuck in his kingdom underneath the new kingdom, Maurizio. I mean, seriously, what better way to guard a seal than to build your own new empire around it? Maybe that also explains why Zebek needs the Galela, because they were incredibly talented builders, and it's clear with their modern day branch that they build more than just regular ships. The Galela, probably frozen in Punk Hazard, might have built these gates, and Zebek needs them to dismantle them so that Davy can be free once again. And the real big kicker for me is that it all might explain the entire flooding thing. Like seriously, what better way to ensure that nobody goes deep below to find him than to just flood the entire world on top of things? Like, as I said way at the beginning of this video, these gates were very likely built way before the world was ever flooded, and after seeing the insane powers of the Abyss, I don't think it's too much to say that Davy D. Jones may not have always been a good figure. Zebek himself seems like a pretty stand-up guy, but Blackbeard isn't. I mean, maybe in some weird twist of fate, Imu is a hero by sealing away Davy Jones and was just corrupted by his dark powers. Maybe, just maybe, Oda will actually come full circle and make the true big bad of the One Piece world the spooky enemy of all real-life pirates, Davy Jones. Now, just for a little bit of context here, it's a little bit of a headcanon of mine that Davy Jones might have been maybe a Lunarian. I mean, Rocks called him a former king of the world, and he might just have ruled the world from atop the Red Line. So I've been wondering for a while, why did Imu and the world government set up shop there out of all places? Which brings us to Maurizio, the capital city of the world government. It's where all the celestial dragons live, where the countries of the One Piece world come together for the Great Reverie every couple of years, where the Gorosei sit around in the Room of Authority, and where Imu occupies the not quite so empty throne. But I think that Maurizio is actually hiding some way bigger secrets than just Imu's existence. When I first started trying to really uncover the true purpose and secret of Maurizio, I started asking more and more questions. Questions like, why did the Celestial Dragons claim the top of the Red Line where there's pretty much nothing? What was the name of the Great Ancient Kingdom? And how did Devil Fruits really came to be? And believe it or not, I do think I figured out all the answers to each of these questions of some truly huge One Piece mysteries in this very video. But to truly understand the dark secrets of Maurizio, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning, all the way to the first world, where I'm gonna lay out a rough sketch of what I think happened back in the days of Nika and the other gods. You know what that means? Let us once again consult the most sacred of the texts, the Harley One. In the first section, the Sun God and the Earth God engage in this monumental battle for the fate of the world and humanity. The Sun God stands up for the enslaved people of the world, while the Earth God rages that they dare to use the Forbidden Sun, which is pretty much my reaction whenever someone tries to touch my Capri Sun, so I kinda get it, man. So, the Earth God summoned his bestie, the Hell Flame Serpent, and they shrouded the entire world in death and darkness, just like besties do. But the snake here could not hang with Nika, and I don't really think that it made it through that entire war alive. Now, of course, the Hellflame Serpent looks absolutely massive in that mural, towering over this entire civilization, but honestly, even that I think is a huge understatement. I think that this serpent was large enough to encircle the entire globe, just like Jormungandr from Norse mythology, a giant world serpent. And then you can pretty much guess what I'm thinking. Over time, its remains withered, rock and stone formed around its scales, and it literally became the Red Line. Now, as you probably know, obviously, the big hint for this entire theory is that Dorian Bragi literally called the Red Line a serpent soaked in blood, and I don't really think that they're just adding in a little bit of extra poetic flair here. If you look up foreshadowing in a dictionary, it probably just has a picture of that very panel and then another smaller picture off to the side of Oda just laughing about it. And then after that, thanks to Marco, we also know that the Red Line became known as the Land of the Gods and that the Lunarian tribe also used to live here. Now, something tells me it's not just because they wanted to watch over the world from way up high. No, I think that's a part of it, sure, but I think they actually made their home on the Red Line because it was the Hellflame Serpent originally. And let's be real, even in death, this giant thing probably still contains some truly insane powers. And in the same way that they didn't want to give humans unlimited access to the Forbidden Sun, it would probably be pretty dangerous to just let the humans get control of the Hellflame Serpent's dark power and whatever else is hidden inside there. Now, the next question we probably want to ask is, what did the Lunarian society even look like up there? So I think it's fair to assume that the Lunarians were in some way, shape, or form directly connected to Nika. I mean, I'm personally heavily on the team that Nika straight up was a Lunarian, and eventually this tribe was then also worshipping Joy Boy, at least according to King himself. And I think it's pretty clear that thanks to the Moon connections, the Forbidden Sun connections, and the Great Kingdom connections, which is the Ancient Kingdom in Japanese, these guys weren't just roughing it up there. I kind of imagine that they actually established a real city or even a country up there. You know, one with palaces and underground chambers, all the good stuff, one with temples dedicated to worshipping the sun god Nika, one that I think still stands to this day, Mary Joie, and rising up from the center of it was the sunlight tree Eve, whose roots spread light just like the sun god spread light across the world. In fact, I like to speculate that this city was so significant that it was probably the capital of the Great Kingdom by the time that the second One Piece world came around. We all know that during the Void Century, of course, Imu and the other 20 kings rose to power, and when they won that giant war, they took literally everything. As you probably know, I've already speculated in some other videos that structures like Impel Down and the Gates of Justice are actually remnants from the ancient One Piece world that the world government then later has claimed for themselves. I don't think that any of these things were built by Imu themselves. And I think that this assumption is especially true for Mary Joie. Imu and the Celestial Dragons were asserting themselves as the new gods of this world. So it would only make sense, I think, for them to now live in the land of the gods, which it was already before they ever gained power. But I think that Imu wanted a lot more than just the city. They wanted the dark power and all the secrets that slept underneath it. I like to think that over the remains of this ancient kingdom that once was ruled by the Lunarians, the Celestial Dragons built some new elaborate architecture, a fancy new coat of paint, you could say, to hide the original ownership of their capital city. And in case you didn't know, Oda actually models the design of buildings like Pangaea Castle in the style of the real world's French aristocracy, which is a pretty steep pivot away from these, industrial vibes that the First World was actually rocking originally in the mural, with structures like the Gates of Justice, I think, with its massive metal rivels, or the stonework of Impel Down, which I think are a lot more crude and brutal. But I also think that Imu and Co didn't just take the city and its buildings, they stole their very names themselves. They used them for their own dark purposes in a show of true power, divorcing themselves from their original meaning. Much, by the way, like how I hope that Shaki actually divorces Rayleigh at some point, so, she'll be available again. Wait, are they even married? I'm not even gonna look that up right now. Let's just cook here for a second. Each of these names actually shares a ton of significance with our real world that I think can help us unravel the true intentions that Oda has with these locations, as well as Imu's purpose in claiming each one of them. You might have noticed, but names are kind of important in One Piece. Just think about how many of them are hidden away, like the name of the Great Kingdom, the Davy Clan, the D Clan. Names are very meaningful things in the story, and by claiming the original names of these places for themselves now for the New World government, the Celestial Dragons, I think, have robbed the Lunarians and the original Great Kingdom of their original meaning, all while also erasing the rightful owners of these structures from history, leaving nothing but a void behind. Such, I think, is the case especially for Pangaea Castle. In the real world, Pangaea, by the way, is of course the name scientists have given to the original supercontinent that once existed on Earth, because once upon a time, in our world, Europe and Africa and the Americas, they were all pretty tight. Inseparable even. Well, I mean inseparable until the tectonic plates started tectonicking around and, well, at some point they separated, right? And before this large civilization was then sunk beneath the ocean, the Great Kingdom stretched across, well, the entire globe probably, an interconnected landmass promoting trade and travel amongst many cultures. Now though, as we know from Vegapunk's message and everything, the remains of the civilization sleep beneath the ocean, with only its highest peaks and mountains now emerging as the little islands that we see scattered across the Four Blues and especially the Grand Line. In other words, in the current One Piece era, the One Piece world's Pangaea has been broken apart and flooded. But I still think that Imu very much kept the name Pangaea Castle very much intentionally alive. You see, with the history of the Void Century erased from the minds of all the people, except for, like all the people who still know about it, now Pangaea takes on a very twisted new meaning, because now they rule from atop the world's single remaining continent, the Red Line, ensnaring the entire globe very much like the world government's grip itself. And I think that the very same naming convention actually applies to Shangara, which was revealed is the temple where the Holy Knights take up residence. If you weren't aware of this, we actually got the name drop for this location in chapter 1167, and it appears in a single page. Well, let me tell you, I can't wait for some more Shangara lore, because just the name alone is such a rich, crazy vein for theorizing and just send my brain into absolute overdrive considering the possibilities here. I believe that what once was a temple dedicated to worshipping the sun god Nika has now been corrupted into a home for the most dedicated servants of the devil, the dark god Imu themselves. Because I mean, they're kind of almost like a sun god, just the complete opposite. But what about its name? Why did Oda decide to call this place Shangara? Well, for that one, I'm gonna have to switch over into my patented segment you've now all come to expect in every video, Mythology with Manu. Welcome, because I love mythology, you probably love mythology, but not nearly as much as Oda apparently, because a quick search for Shangara will show you that it's a style of Zimbabwean dance, and while Luffy and Joy Boy are Brazilian coded, a vibrant and traditional folk dance does give me pretty strong Sun God Nika vibes. Like, I mean, come on. The drums of liberation that spread dance and laughter around the world, you can't tell me that there's not some kind of connection here at least, so perhaps this temple was a place where dancing and songs and laughter were all used in order to honor and worship Nika, the sun god. After all, because of King, we do know that the Lunarians were worshippers of Joy Boy specifically, and very likely Nika in return too, since Joy Boy was the last person to awaken what? Yes, the Nika fruit. So I hope you agree, but to me it kind of would make a lot of sense if they had established this temple in the first place, the Lunarians, not Imu. But next I also want to take a look at a more in-universe explanation, because when I took a closer look at Shangara specifically, I can also see a combination of names that I'm just all too familiar with, and you should be too. Of course, there is Shandora, the city of gold. The city was founded by the Shandians, who were also a winged race that came from a civilization on the moon, much like the Lunarians probably. Because despite the difference in their wing color, I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination to assume that these people of the moon have some historical connection to each other. I think that would be the obvious thing to assume. And that would of course also mean that they have a common origin in their lunar civilization. But then of course the other half of Shangara comes from Gara, the one-tailed Chinchuriki from the 5th Kazakh. Oh wait, nope, wrong series. Let's get rid of that. Shangara shares a name with Kalgara, the Shandian warrior from the Skypian backstory. I mean, for all we know, Gara could be a common suffix for names amongst, the winged races, with it still being used in Kalgara's name hundreds of years later. As we see in the mural, the Lunarians were very much allied with Joy Boy in the war, and Shandora was entrusted with safeguarding one of the poneglyphs, which I think means that it's very likely that they were the ones who named and founded this very temple. And the fact that the Skypians refer to their ruler as God, remember that from Skypia, just makes it all the more twisted, I think, that Imu is now using Shangara to house their own Knights of God. And what can I say? Skypia just continues to be the arc that keeps on giving. One day, all that money I've invested in Long Ring Longland Island will pay off too. I just know it. Just need a little bit more. However, this is not where our discussion of Shangara ends, because what new meaning has it taken on now that Imu has stolen it and its name? For that answer, I think we need to take a look at a very similar sounding place that maybe you thought of first, Shangri-La. In James Hilton's novel Lost Horizon, it's the name of a very idyllic utopian valley within Tibet's Kunlun Mountains, which you might know as the home of Danny Rand, the immortal Iron Fist. Kunlun, by the way, is one of the Earth's tallest ranges, much like the Red Line is the highest point in the One Piece world. In the novel, the people who live in Shangri-La live for hundreds of years and are nearly considered to be immortal, just like the God's Knights who have been granted the power of immortality through Imu. And Shangri-La itself was named after a much older religious term, Shambhala, a spiritual kingdom in Tibetan Buddhism. This hidden away, ancient, powerful kingdom is said to usher in a golden age where humanity is governed by the gods, which sounds a lot like Imu declaring themselves a god and then ruling over the blue planet, at least to me. Alright, now, Pangaea Castle and Shangara are one thing, but no name is more important, I think, than that of the city itself, Mary Joie. This name too, I think, was stolen from the Great Kingdom. Remember that fateful day on Ohara? Oh, don't even want to think about it. Channel trauma. The name that Clover threatened to reveal to the government, the name that, if made public, would have sent the entire world into shock, I think would have precisely been so shocking because it had never been changed after Imu conquered it. I think that the name of the ancient kingdom was Mary Joy, named for its ruler, Joy Boy, who brought happiness and merriment to the world. As that one person who's already typing an angry comment might have realized, the idea that the Great Kingdom might have been named Mary Joy is not my own. This idea has been floating around the larger One Piece community for literal years at this point, but I think that with every single piece of information we learn about the Void Century and everything else, the stocks of this theory being true just keep going up, so I'm basically treating it as headcanon at this point, and I've somehow never talked about it on the channel. I really hope that this is the case, and I actually think it's especially perfect based on the way that the official English translation stylizes it, because Mary Joie, kind of being like the bourgeoisie, which, no, is not the beef at Korean barbecue, that's bulgogi. The bourgeoisie is the wealthy ruling class as opposed to, the working class. It just kind of fits in way too perfectly, don't you think, given the entire Celestial Dragons, whole vibe? They're this group that sees themselves as above everyone else, all the peasants, living in this lap of luxury and utterly dependent on slave labor, but not wanting to mingle with the dirty regular working class. And with bourgeoisie being a French term that I probably absolutely butchered, by the way, that French aristocratic style of architecture that we see all over the city of Mary Joie makes perfect sense, especially since we know a revolution has just arrived at the city's doorstep. Let's just say Vice Admiral Bastille better switch sides soon, because Dragon's on his way, I think, and with all of these themes that Oda's dropping, I'm not even gonna be surprised if he just has the guillotine fruit at this point. And actually, while we're talking about how Oda based the meanings of these places' names on real-life religious or historical elements, I also have to acknowledge his god-tier writing on this. I mean, just the concept of claiming the Great Kingdom's names for places like Shangara and Mary Joie has some great symbolic significance as well, because it speaks to Imu and the Celestial Dragon's supreme lack of creativity. I mean, just look at this guy. Does this guy look like he's ever picked up a paintbrush in his life? And when Gunko busts out her Walkman, she's not listening to the next Don Quixote Smash single. Even the world nobles are jamming out to my man Brook, who, ironically enough, might have been a holy knight. Different story. Imu and the Gorosei seemingly finished the battle, laid claim to the Lunarians' capital city, and said, Well, okay, what should we call it? And then I guess they just shrugged, saying that they would get back to it later. And 800 years later, no changes whatsoever have been made, and none were even necessary because people just straight up have forgotten the original meaning and the original history. But I gotta be honest, that's one of the only ways I think that shooting Clover to stop him from revealing the name of the Great Kingdom makes any sense. I mean, it would have to be something that people in the One Piece world already recognize and know about, or why else would it be all that shocking if it was a new name like Humphrey? I don't know. Like, the same thing is absolutely the case in the real world, with tons of locations that have been subjected to conquest or colonialism, a theme, of course, that Oda has directly written on in arcs like Skypiea. Not that Oda would ever put anything political in One Piece, of course. As one stark example, 26 of the 50 United States of America's names are derived from Native American languages. But go ask the average Boston resident what Massachusetts means to the native Wampanoag people, they're probably unlikely to even know what language or culture it originally comes from, because understandably, to them it's just the name of the place where they live, devoid of any more significant or deep meaning. And of course, this process doesn't necessarily even happen with some ill intentions in every case. The name sometimes just sticks around, people call the place by the name its original inhabitants used, and generation by generation, the true meaning slowly starts getting forgotten bit by bit. And this very process is incredibly common across landmasses across the entire world, whether it's the Americas or somewhere on literally any other continent. And the numbers truly skyrocket if you look at cities, geographical features, etc. The name remains the same, but the original meaning is finally lost on the people who use it every day now, a shadow of its former self, a distant memory of what once was. And I think the same is just true for the Celestial Dragons here. I kind of doubt that your, St. Charleses of the world would have any idea where the name Mary Joie, Shangara, or Pangaea Castle originally came from. They're just content entertaining themselves with some twisted human hunting competitions and riding around on the backs of their slaves. So even within the Holy Land, only those at the very top know the truth behind that history. And even less so, does the average Celestial Dragon know the dark secrets that lay right beneath their own feet, their icky, disgusting dragon hooves? I don't think so. I think they have no clue about the unspeakable power that Emu wields hidden within the Red Line itself. Claiming the land of the gods from the Lunarians went far beyond just a mere show of force or power. It was about more than just the symbolism of standing atop their new world order and taking over from the previous gods, because the city of Mary Joy guarded a great power before Emu ever stepped foot in it. A power that Emu needed, or at the very least really wanted, for themselves. A power that would finally solidify the control over the Blue Planet. It could even be considered a national treasure, such as Doflamingo spoke of during the Dressrosa arc. Though I will say that the national treasure of Marijoa is actually just its own rabbit hole worthy of its own video, so that's gonna come out soon. Keep your eye out for that one. But I think it's no coincidence that the Celestial Dragons took over the Red Line specifically, because even in death, as we talked about at the beginning, I think the Hellflame Serpent's body holds some truly unspeakable power. You see, the Great Kingdom had this endless energy source, one made of infinite light, the Forbidden Sun. Very suitable for a civilization attached to Nika and Joy Boy. In fact, I've even speculated before that the Forbidden Sun might have come from Nika's own Lunarian flame itself. But whether it was natural or one of the great scientific advancements of the original One Piece world, this power source fueled the great technology of the ancient world, including, I think, the ancient weapons. That's, I think, why Emu was only able to fire up Uranus again to use on Lulusia once Vegapunk had recreated the Mother Flame, but the Forbidden Sun wasn't the only unbelievable power source available here, because hidden within the Red Line itself, or literally being the Red Line itself, I guess, was the Hellflame Serpent. And the Hellflame part here really gives me some pause. I think that the Hellflame Serpent itself could be the source of Emu's abyssal powers. Between the satanic summoning circles and the horns and the bat wings, it's kind of giving off a lot of hell vibes, and anytime the Abyss powers are being used, or when a member of the Holy Knights uses certain abilities, these dark wisps of, flames seem to come off the attacks. Like, very literally, these could be considered Hell flames. You see what I mean? Like, does Imu's ability to control the abyss have to do with the fact that they live right on top of it? And this kind of ties into the fact that Luffy is fated to destroy Fishman Island. Remember? For literal years, based on this, it's been speculated that the red line at the end of the story has to go. All the island whales hate it, they know it's unnatural, and there just shouldn't be this giant artificial continent that's separating all the oceans. And Luffy, of course, doesn't have very much reason to just directly destroy his allies on Fishman Island, but if he destroyed the red line, which is right above it, it would come crumbling down on Fishman Island, destroying it in the process, which is unfortunate but might need to happen. Or maybe Luffy's gonna do it as a favor to his homeboy Loki. That way his girl Shirahoshi has no excuses but to crash at his place for a bit, and, you know, Luffy might be that type of bro. Probably not though, but who knows? And if the idea that the source of Imu's abyssal powers is literally contained inside the red line, it gives even more reason that the red line must be destroyed at some point. Or a much more terrifying thought, could the Hellflame Serpent itself be resurrected and finally stir awake once again for the first time since the first One Piece world? Because that alone would also probably do some residual damage to Fishman Island too, but it would kind of hurt the Luffy causing it part unless Luffy fights with the Hellflame Serpent. But it would be a great way to bring in a truly gargantuan endgame boss or a cool pet for Luffy. Because let's not forget, like practically every single arc in One Piece ends up with the big bad threatening the entire island's destruction. You've got Raigo, the birdcage, all the classics really. So I think it only makes sense that the final saga will introduce a hard time limit for the fight with a planet-ending threat that Luffy will have to stop in time. And actually, while I'm on the topic, how much is continent and how much is the remains of the Hellflame Serpent? Because when we see Imu go down into the secret chambers beneath Pangaea Castle, the one, you know, where they have the big straw hat and deep freeze, could that room be dug into the Hellflame Serpent itself? I mean, I'm not even sure what that would mean yet, but I think it's intriguing nonetheless, and we have seen that before with Laboon technically, who, now that I think about it, ironically got introduced when we first see the red line. But if the Hellflame Serpent is buried within the red line, then there is one thing that logically must go straight through it, which is the Eve Tree. And even more so than the Abyss, I think that laying claim to the Eve Tree is the true purpose of Merijoa. It's the real reason above all others, I think, that I've discussed that Imu wanted to take the capital city of Merijoy for themselves. And I'll admit it, technically, we don't have canon confirmation that the Eve Tree does grow out of the top of the red line. Some characters in Fishman Island, of course, suspect that it might just be part of the Sabaody mangroves, but that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me because, and hear me out here, most trees that I see every day typically grow straight up and no one surpasses me in tree knowledge. I mean, oaks, elms, Adams, I've seen it all. If its roots are in Fishman Island, it just makes the most intuitive sense that the tree above it, the Eve Tree's branches, are in Merijoa going through the red line because, again, red line directly beneath it is Fishman Island, and Imu's claim of it follows the exact same pattern as the names that I've discussed before. And let's also not forget that it's called the Sunlight Eve Tree, and there's quite literally light because of these roots 10,000 meters below the ocean, where otherwise it would be absolutely dark, so that kind of makes a lot of sense. And Imu's claim of this tree follows the exact same pattern as the names that I've discussed before, claiming something originally from the Great Kingdom and then twisting it for their own dark purpose. So first, let me talk about how I think the Eve Tree and Devil Fruits actually came to be, and then I'll go into Imu's purpose for them now that they actually are controlling Merijoa. Now, according to Dr. Vegapunk, Devil Fruits were a form of ancient technology that made dreams manifest. And the biggest dreams of all, Nika and Joy Boy. Nika, who may have originally created the Red Line, indirectly at least by defeating the Hellflame Serpent, and his successor Joy Boy, who ruled over the Great Kingdom maybe from atop the Red Line. I think it's fair to speculate that maybe the people atop the Red Line were the originators of those Devil Fruits. And for the extra spicy Lunarian connection here, let's not forget the one confirmed Lunarian name that we have in the story, since we're not like 100% certain that either Nika or Joy Boy actually were Lunarians, but the one Lunarian in the story, and possibly the last surviving one, is King, but his true name is of course not King, it's romanized as Albert. But since we know how L's and R's go in Japanese translation, it's close enough, I think, to the word arbor, you know, like Arbor Day, the Latin word for tree. You know, the thing that I'm an expert on, to raise my eyebrows. The Eve tree is the prime suspect for where devil fruits originate, I think. I mean, where do fruits grow? Duh, trees. The last time I checked, though, I guess some actually grow in bushes. Well, it's mostly trees. And we've been spending quite a while in Elbaf now, walking all around the giant branches of the Adam tree, and I haven't seen any suspiciously swirly fruits on any branches so far, at least. If we've got two special trees in the One Piece world and it's not on the Adam tree, well, the Eve tree just makes more sense than any location anywhere else, I think. So, someone in the Great Kingdom very likely planted the Eve tree in order to make dreams come true. And given that its full name is the Sunlight Tree Eve, a connection to the sun god Nika and his kingdom makes perfect sense, I think. Was it just an advanced technology? Were they grown, I don't know, in a lab? We see that even with innovations like Caesar's artificial smile fruits, even the fakes have to be grown on a real tree. So were these fruits pumped full of some of that good old forbidden sun juice? I don't think so. After all, the Sunlight Tree Eve would seem to get plenty of light on its own. Instead, I think that the devil fruits come from that other power source present on the red line we've talked about before. Because if its roots stretch all the way down to Fishman Island, then logically those roots are feeding off of the remains of the Hellflame Serpent itself, correct? It's hellish powers putting the devil in the devil fruits, and the devil fruit name itself could very much be a rebrand from Imu's perspective, because despite appearing as demons themselves by using the abyss, they sure like to paint the D-Clan as the real devils rather than themselves, and you know, it's kind of like the classic, I'll blame you for what I'm doing kind of move. And you won't believe this, but this also once again lines up pretty nicely with some mythology, so let's dig into a little bit more Bible piece real quick, because the Adam and Eve trees are obviously named for Adam and Eve, the first man and woman described in the book of Genesis. And in this creation myth, God actually forms Eve from Adam's rib. And in the same way, I'm gonna speculate that the Eve tree was actually grown from a cutting of the Adam tree. A piece of the Adam tree on Elbaf, where the giants lived, may have been planted on the red line to introduce some greenery to the barren landscape, and in a symbol of the new great kingdom that the Lunarians were building, this might have been a very important moment. But what other important figure shows up in the Adam and Eve story? Exactly, the serpent. The serpent who tempts Eve with the forbidden fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and when she eats of that fruit, disobeying God's commands, she and Adam are both cast out of paradise. And where does Imu love to hang out all the time? In the strip club. No, it's in the flower room, their garden, their own personal garden Eden, where the devil fruits might be growing. In One Piece, I think it's through the properties of the Eve tree and the roots that feed off the ancient blood of the Hellflame Serpent that they actually create the forbidden fruit, devil fruits. This could even potentially explain devil fruit users' weakness to seawater. Let's not forget that the Hellflame Serpent was apparently allied with the Earth God in the first world, and it would make perfect sense if the Earth God was opposed in some way, shape, or form to the Sea God, the world being flooded and everything. But if this is the origin of the Eve tree and the devil fruits, how does this relate to the true purpose of Morijoa, you might now be asking? Manu, what are you talking about? How does all of this factor into Imu's big supposed master plan for control of the world? Well, I believe that Imu wants to actually control these fruits for themselves. Some have already speculated in the past that one condition that would make someone immune to Domi Reversi is being a devil fruit user. In case you haven't realized it, we have yet to see Imu use this technique against anyone who has eaten a devil fruit. And this too could make sense if the devil fruit powers are derived from the remains of the Hellflame Serpent, because it could kind of create a sort of immunity from the abyss powers that are also probably derived from the Hellflame Serpent. However, I will say we just don't quite know enough yet about Domi Reversi and Imu's true powers to make that call yet. It's definitely an interesting idea though, and if that happens, I'm gonna be even stronger on this theory. But Imu's desire for the devil fruits goes far beyond just this failsafe. Rox's plan to take Imu down very clearly involved two very specific and special devil fruits, probably the darkness fruit and the fruit hidden on Elbaf that Loki ate, and then there's also the sun god Nika fruit that clearly spells some kind of trouble based on the fact that Imu gets just mega triggered whenever they sense anything related to Joy Boy, who again had that same fruit. But even more than just that, I think that Imu simply wants a monopoly on power straight up, right? Not that complicated. They'll never be satisfied until their control is absolute. They've been working for hundreds of years, extracting taxes, resources, and slaves from countries across the world, and they have told us directly during the Rocks and, God Valley flashback that their perfect world is not quite completed yet. But just like the poneglyphs managed to spread throughout the world, so did devil fruits, powerful weapons that could be used against the world government. And to this day, of course, the government has already collected many of these powerful fruits, distributed some to the loyal soldiers within the Marines and Cypherpole, but far too many are still held by pirates, and there's only one surefire way that Imu could get them all back. They could get all these fruits to reincarnate back on their rightful home, the Eve Tree, since a devil fruit incarnates into the nearest fruit when a user dies. And so the only way to return all of them home to Marijua would be to flood and sink the entire world, drowning all those fruit users. Because if all the devil fruit users succumb to the biggest weakness of devil fruits, drowning, and all of the other world's fruit trees were also being killed, submerged beneath seawater, there's only one place for all of these fruits to go, right back to Marijua atop the red line, the highest point in the world that wouldn't be sunk, where Imu would have complete control over each single devil fruit, over the abyssal powers of the Hellflame Serpent, and if the deal with York works out, even the power of the Mother Flame. And with all of the world's power under their control, Imu could truly recreate the world in their own image. So I think that the War of the Void Century truly was only step one in this big plan. Imu's been working towards their real plan for the last 800 years ever since, and the real war for the fate of the entire world has started right now. And you already know that to try to turn that war in the Celestial Dragon's favor, they're gonna try make use of the national treasure of Marijua, which leaves me with just one big question. What is the national treasure of Marijua? There are, as you probably know, a lot of possibilities. Is it Imu, the leader of the world government itself? The Eve Tree, right? The possible source of all devil fruits. What about this cold frozen hat here? Or maybe it's answer number D, none of the above. But you see, thanks to the almighty powers of reading comprehension and media literacy, I think we might finally be able to actually find a real answer today. Maybe even the right answer, which would be a cool new thing for me. Maybe we can experience that together. So, is the national treasure of Marijua the Eve Tree? In my video talking about the true purpose of Marijua specifically, I already discussed that I think that the Eve Tree could be one of the central reasons that the Celestial Dragons actually, made their base on top of the red line in the first place. If you haven't seen that video yet, link's gonna be below, but long story short, I think that the devil fruits probably came from the Eve Tree, right? And that they get their powers because its roots are sucking up a bunch of sweet devilish energy from the Hellflame Serpent, which might be currently encased inside the red line itself. But while I do think that that's true, I don't think it actually lines up well enough with what we actually have been told about the national treasure from Doflamingo. I mean, we do know that the national treasure is something that Dofi discovered on Marijua that he wasn't supposed to know about, even as a Celestial Dragon, and that if he had been immortal that day already, he would have been able to use it. Now, just to be completely fair here, the one argument I guess you could make for the treasure being the Eve Tree itself is that if Doflamingo saw a bunch of devil fruits on the tree, he could have logically concluded that if you're immortal, then you could just eat as many devil fruits as you wanted and just get all those powers. But then again, you could just do that with any devil fruit and you wouldn't have to go specifically up to the Holy Land, even though they do have some pretty good ones up there, as we found out recently on God Valley. But instead, I think this is a much better place now to specify some details about the immortality surgery specifically. During Dressrosa, Doflamingo tells us that he needed this ability of the Ope Ope no Mi in order to use whatever the national treasure is. But in the official translation, regeneration, this ability is actually called the perennial youth operation. Now, to be clear, I don't think that this ability necessarily makes someone immortal, as in unable to ever die, but I think instead it gives them eternal youth and prevents them from aging instead. I mean, take me for example, I look no older than 8 years old, but I am extremely mortal, but I'm working on it. And all the lore that we've been getting with the Holy Knights kind of really draws a clear distinction to me between, these two things as well. The Holy Knights have the ability of immortality and regeneration. Whenever they get hit by anything, even if their bodies or their brains are blown apart, they'll just regenerate over time. But we do see many people with Imu's contracts actually aging, like Garling, who's an old man now, but was absolutely young during God Valley. However, some others, of course, like the Geoise specifically, don't seem to age at all. Saturn looked the same 200 years ago, which kind of suggests to me that immortality and eternal youth are two separate powers which Imu can actually bestow upon his followers. Now, if that's the case, then somebody might be able to actually receive the perennial youth operation and still die from things like consuming 2 devil fruits or being shot or, pick your death, right? That is one reason that I don't think the Eve tree really works here. I mean, Dofi already has trained his own string fruit to its absolute limit, even awakening it, so would he just spend decades with his immortality carefully training each ability, even though a good hockey user could probably just bypass most of those anyways? And again, the even bigger problem we already mentioned, why even go to Marijoa? Why not just, pull a Blackbeard and just collect plenty of other uber powerful fruits that are already out on the Blue Sea? I mean, for all that he knows, all the fruits left on the Eve tree might just be jacket fruits, right? Kind of like that. So yes, while I do think that the Eve tree is a huge part of Imu's plan and a huge part of, the One Piece world's history, I just don't think it is the national treasure that Doflamingo talked about. But speaking of Imu here, did Doflamingo just discover Imu on that day? Are they the national treasure? I mean, Imu is one of the world government's greatest secrets. No one's supposed to know about them, and when people like Walpole do discover their existence, they are hunted down until they are dead, or in Walpole's case, alive. And also in Sabo's case, alive. And also in Vivi's case, alive, and all the people who saw Imu in God Valley, well, most of them alive, but definitely not hunted down because they saw Imu. But you get my point. If someone sees Imu, they try to hunt them down, kind of like how I once tried to spy on Oda's office and now the Viz Media agents are hunting me down. But also, Doflamingo talks about using the national treasure. It definitely feels more like an object, is what I would say. I think, more accurately, Dofi probably discovered Imu's existence and the national treasure together. I mean, think about it. When Dofi is sent to kill Moria, he reveals that he was sent from someone higher up than Sengoku, and in retrospect, this seems like huge foreshadowing of Imu's existence. Because, I mean, who is there? There are like a few other options of people higher than Sengoku. There's Kong, the Gorosei, maybe the Holy Knight. But come on, you gotta admit it's way cooler if Dofi's just meeting up with Imu on the wreck. Kind of pretty dope, and he is a celestial dragon, a former one. So, while the national treasure is definitely connected to Imu, I think, I don't believe that Imu is the national treasure itself, and the biggest reason I think that comes back to where I am right now. I'm in Japan, in case you didn't know. And the word in Japanese that Oda uses for national treasure is actually super important. Yes, little Japanese lesson again. The word that he uses is kokuho, and this isn't a term that's just being invented by Oda for One Piece, and he does do that sometimes, don't get me wrong, but kokuho is an actual term that the Japanese use to name its own national treasures. These are named by Japan's Agency of Cultural Affairs and include things like buildings and art that have a high historic or artistic value. From Shinto shrines to literal swords, there are tons of national treasures here in Tokyo and Japan overall, but none are people or living things. In fact, a national living treasure is a very different thing. That's a ningen kokuho, living people who master and preserve skills important to Japanese culture and heritage. Also, although they are recognized by the government agencies, they aren't actually written into law like some of the other real national treasures are. So could Oda still call Imu a national treasure for confusion's sake instead of saying a national living treasure? I mean, he could. He writes the story, but I kind of think it's very notable that he uses that phrasing specifically which leads me to believe that it's an object and not a living thing. I'm also not sure how Doflamingo would use Emu, like he says he could use the national treasure. How would that actually work? I mean, the only thing I guess is the personality swap idea. We talked about this in this Law video recently. I think it's fair enough to speculate that Law might be the key to defeating Emu, but that doesn't mean they are the national treasure. I think you need to maybe be in Emu's boots, and Dofi wants to be in Emu's body to use the treasure that way. That kind of makes the most sense. Alright, if it's not Emu, what about the Hellflame Serpent? I mean, this ancient beast from the first One Piece world that probably remains within the Red Line, or is the Red Line itself, ensnaring the entire globe. I mean, if Dofi discovered the truth about the Red Line, he could probably think of a, few twisted uses for it. I also think that the best bet for when Dofi actually found out about the treasure was when he was, 10 years old and brought his father's head back to Marijoa in a very desperate plea to be reinstated as a Celestial Dragon. However, they didn't take kindly to that surface dweller coming back and just basically chased him off, which is ironic because they were so happy when Shanks came back. But yeah, young Dofi was basically surrounded by a mob of angry Celestial Dragons trying to run him out of the city, and while he was trying to avoid the people chasing him out, he must have run into a highly restricted zone probably and seen something that he was not supposed to see. As we've now seen on multiple occasions, I think, I would argue that Marijoa really has a security problem and really needs to beef up its surveillance if even people like Wapol can stumble onto the world's best kept secrets. So how would Dofi find a giant serpent? It kind of depends on how deep the serpent's remains actually exist within the Red Line. Like, is it still intact? Is it decomposed or sealed away? And at that gargantuan size, even if Dofi found the secret Hellflame Serpent access chamber, I'm not exactly sure he could tell what he was even looking at or how it could be used. We do know based on what Dofi says in Dressrosa that the national treasure is something that he could only use if he was made immortal, and I'm just not really sure how he discovered any of that if it is the actual Hellflame Serpent. But if you have a good explanation or idea for this, please let me know. But then I guess on top of that, it also kind of runs into the same problem as Emu, where the serpent was a living creature instead of an object, like I'm pretty sure the treasure is. It's kind of unclear whether a body counts as an object or something alive. It's kind of like Schrodinger's treasure, I guess. So instead, let's now really get into some of the heavy hitters. The things that to me personally are the most likely candidates for Marijoa's national treasure, starting with that cold straw hat that Emu got stashed in this big giant freezer. And this one really makes a lot of sense to me, I gotta say. I mean, first off, it is an object. Yay, so it does make sense with the national treasure phrasing in Japanese, like legal terms. But mostly it also makes sense because it has a crazy strong connection to Joy Boy and the Great Kingdom. And of course, it gets introduced with Emu together. Now, when I talked about the true purpose of Marijoa, again, this video, I speculated that it used to be the capital of the Great Kingdom and was taken over by Emu and the Celestial Dragons later on and kind of repurposed, just like how the Celestial Dragons probably took over, the ancient structures like the Gates of Justice and like Impel Down. Now, if that's the case though, then the national treasure is also probably something that was originally connected with the Great Kingdom before then being stolen by Emu. And this would actually put it in line with the other national treasures that we've also seen in One Piece already. Specifically, there are two that we know about, and wouldn't you know it, they both have a deep connection to the Great Kingdom too, to Joy Boy's allies, and of course then ultimately to Joy Boy himself. The first one of these is Shusui, the sword from Wano that was once wielded by the legendary swordsman Ryuma, which does line up pretty well with Japan's actual real national treasures, since over 100 of them are swords, and especially the 3 regalia that are like the most important ones and belong to the Emperor family. One of them is a sword, a mirror, and a jade. But honestly, if those 100 swords weren't beloved cultural artifacts here in Japan, I'd probably go out, collect them, and then master the 100 sword style myself. But the one I really want to point out is the national treasure of Fishman Island, the Tamate Bako box. You remember the pills that Hody Jones and his crew then used to get like super big power boosts? Not that it was anywhere close enough to do anything against the Straw Hats, but this national treasure just so happens to turn the fishmen's hair white and turn their eyes red and make them super broken powerful. In other words, these pills make people go diet gear 5. And I mean, with the history that there is between Fishman Island and Joy Boy, were these literally designed to replicate some of that Nika power? I mean, they even get super crazy old after eating those, just like Luffy does temporarily after he comes out of his transformations. And of course, just for completion's sake, the Ming Sulong forms of course also looks very similar, and as we saw with Beppo eating a rumble ball, that transformation can also be put into pill form when you have a capable doctor like Chopper putting them together as well. And when Chopper actually eats too many rumble balls, he ends up turning into his baby Geezer form here, which also has that old man flavor to it that Luffy has. Oh, and in case you were wondering, yes, turns out that old man is my favorite Kit Kat flavor. Thanks for asking. The National Treasure probably isn't something that Emu created, right? I think it's probably something connected to the Ancient Kingdom, to Joy Boy, and Emu just kind of took it over. And if the National Treasure works the same way that maybe the energy steroids do as well, exchanging rapid aging for an increase in power, that would line up pretty well with the fact that you've got to be immortal in order to use it. Because if the immortality surgery is actually an eternal youth operation, then somebody could eat as many energy steroids as they wanted with not ever having to face any of the, growing old and dying side effects. Or, more importantly for this video, they might then be able to use a very special straw hat that once probably belonged to no one else than Joy Boy himself. When we first meet Emu, they travel down below Marijoa to this, giant freezing secret room where they visited a huge straw hat. Is this room just a memorial to Joy Boy, who was probably once Emu's friend, rival, something before they ended up on opposing sides of the Void Century War? Or is this cold storage actually a treasure room? A secret room, kind of like what we've recently seen on Elbaf in the throne room. But how would a hat be a national treasure? Well, it all comes back to Joy Boy's Haki Knot. Because in case you forgot, on Egghead Island, when Emeth untied the Haki Knot that Joy Boy had stored inside of him, it unleashed a blast of Conqueror's Haki so massive that it bypassed all of the Gorosei's abyssal powers and sent them all packing straight back to Marijoa. And this actually comes back to yet another recent theory of mine about how this hat is actually way more important to the story than we all actually thought, because if the straw of the straw hat can be woven in the same way that the Haki Knot is tied and the way that on the poneglyphs it said, "We who weave history," like in, Skypiea, I think it's possible that Joy Boy has sealed a truly unfathomable amount of his own Haki into this hat, kind of storing his own willpower in physical form. But you might now ask, does this meet the requirements to actually be a national treasure? Well, I mean, it just might, especially if some special Gear 5 sauce could also be stored in it somehow. I mean, we've already seen how Devil Fruit Awakenings can actually affect the environment and other people, sometimes permanently, even if the user dies. So if the same power that causes Luffy to rapidly age after awakening the Nika fruit, if that could be stored inside a hat, just like I think it might have been with the energy steroids, right? Then that means that touching or wearing that hat could rapidly age someone in exchange for giving them some truly insane power. And if Doflamingo out of all people discovered this hat and touched it out of curiosity, aging him a few years instantaneously, then that would tell him that he'd need to be immortal or eternally youthful in order to actually use it. But the immortality surgery doesn't seem to be the only important factor here, of course. Yes, the Ope Ope no Mi's ultimate ability to give up one's own lifespan to make someone else immortal is what Dofi puts the most emphasis on, but he also very specifically notes the personality switching powers, which might low-key be the most underrated and crazy ability that Law has. Let's be real, there was no real reason to bring up that ability specifically during his big monologue, right? So it would seem, at least to me, to hint that both personality switching and immortality are simultaneously important to actually be able to use whatever the national treasure is. So it's possible, I'd say, that it's not just Haki or power stored in the hat, but maybe Joy Boy's soul itself. And I mean, yes, soul stored inside an object, ooh, weird, but between Big Mom and Lost Fruits, embedding someone else's personality or soul into an object doesn't seem absolutely impossible in the One Piece world. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to go and swap yourself into that hat, but if you could take Joy Boy out, does that mean you could just use the power inside of it without any restrictions? I don't know, it feels a little bit crazy, but it also wouldn't even be like the 10th craziest thing that Oda has done in the story yet. I hope you agree. So let's get even crazier. The only direction we now can go. You ever think that it's weird that Emu keeps a hat in a freezer in general? Like, tell me, would you need a freezer to store a hat from someone in the past?
Maybe.
No, you wouldn't. But that's because I think that this freezer isn't a hat room with crazy air conditioning. It's actually a tomb. Specifically, a tomb that holds the body of Joy Boy himself. Once a very flamey hot boy, and now so cold. And I mean, come on, what have we truly seen preserved using ice in One Piece? Aokiji sparing Saul by freezing him in the Ice Time capsule. I'm pretty certain that it's the ancient Galela members who are frozen on Punk Hazard. Moria found Or's preserved body in the Land of Ice. If I'm already speculating that his hat could retain some of his power and haki, then surely his actual corpse, or body frozen in time, would be even more powerful. But then you could ask, why would Emu want to keep a frozen Joy Boy even around? Why are they frozen? Why not just dead? Well, because Emu's been waiting patiently for the exact right time. 800 years of building bridges, waiting for the eternal flame to be recreated by someone, thanks Vegapunk for nothing by the way, and waiting for all of the pieces to come into place in the same way that the Roger Pirates have also reached Laugh Tale, and it was too early for them. It's also been too early for Emu, I think, to enact their plan. But the clock is ticking, and the time to bring the Void Centuries War, which yes, is still ongoing, to a conclusion is almost here. And how could Emu bring Joy Boy back into the picture for the Void Century Volume 2? You might love or hate this, but I actually do think that Moria is the key to everything here.
Jar Jar is the key to all this.
Thriller Bark has been getting the Skypiea treatment very recently, especially with all the insane reveals during Yamato's cover story that Moria is actually a member of the Kozuki clan. So Mr. Zombies clearly got some big things coming in the story, otherwise why would Oda reveal his massive heritage now? Let's not forget that Moria had a super important interaction with Doflamingo specifically after the Marineford War. Oh, you thought I was done talking about Dofi? No way, man. All strings lead to Dofi, and I don't get to talk about him enough. This is the video. Now, somebody, probably Emu and the Gorosei, wanted Moria dead, and they sent Dofi to do the dirty work. Dofi, famous liar, tells him that it's because he's not strong enough to be a warlord anymore, but like, yes, he lost to Luffy, but that's not exactly how that system works, because when Law's warlord status was revoked, they didn't send a fellow warlord to execute him. When they got rid of the warlord system altogether, they sent Marines to arrest the warlords, not just assassinate them all right away. In other words, there is way more going on here, I think. I don't think that Dofi was just trying to kill Moria. I think he had every intention of getting the Kage Kage no Mi specifically. And the biggest clue for me here is that Dofi had the Flame fruit in his possession after the time skip. I mean, it's entirely possible that he got the Mera Mera after Ace's death rather than finding it on the black market, because he may have come prepared with fruits intentionally so he could get the Kage Kage no Mi after killing Moria. He had a fruit on him when Ace died, so bada boom bada bang, the fruit reincarnated with Dofi instead, and he hung on to it, waiting for the perfect occasion to use it, so Blackbeard might not have been the only person coming prepared to catch some devil fruits. Dofi could want the Ope Ope no Mi specifically to become immortal and then use Personality Switch to take the body for himself, but the world government might want the Kage Kage no Mi specifically to revive Joy Boy as a zombie. Both fruits would be able to make use of the body for very different purposes. The government keeping their ancient enemy's corpse frozen for 800 years is definitely the kind of thing that would shake the world to its core, especially controlling them with the shadow fruit on their end, but that still doesn't fully explain why Dofi would think you need to be immortal in order to use it. I mean, there are a few possibilities I can see for this. On the one hand, Dofi can feel the incredible residual power coming off of Joy Boy's body, even in death and frozen. Joy Boy's willpower remains unreal. His body is still radiating haki. But to take that power for himself, he'd need both of the Opi Opi no Mi's greatest abilities, which is why he mentioned both of them in his little speech. Make Joy Boy's body immortal so it can still survive once it's thawed out, then personality swap yourself into it, and you're now an immortal God King with unlimited power. Pretty solid plan, I would say. But I think it could be even cooler than just that, because when little Dofi was sneaking around Marijoa, he might have accidentally run into that tomb, opened it to take a look inside, and had a full-on Indiana Jones Ark of the Covenant moment where just opening the casket already causes anyone around to get blasted by Joy Boy's power. And since he was an inheritor of Nika's powers, just opening the casket had enough residual power remaining that it would age you a few years in an instant, like you ate a fistful of, energy steroids, just like I speculated a little while ago about the stuff with Fishman Island and Hody Jones. Hody Jones can be so happy to be mentioned in the video. No one even comes close to being almost as irrelevant to the story as he is, and I could not care less about him, but you made it into a video at last. Congrats. Now, if that was the case, then Dofi would absolutely know that he'd have to be immortal to actually make use of the treasure at all, because otherwise he'd just die of old age like a few moments of prolonged contact. Now, is this for sure how the national treasure works? No, of course not with theorizing, but try to tell me this is not pretty hardcore. I think you can't. But if this is the case, what does Emo actually want to do with it? What's their plan with the national treasure? Because as far as we can tell, Emo doesn't seem to treat Joy Boy like a weapon. They visit the tomb, they spend all of their days in the flower room staring at pictures of Lily. They're haunted by the memories of the Void Century, memories so painful apparently they want to erase them from history itself. So in Emo's mind, it could be that Joy Boy and Lily, the two people closest to them, maybe betrayed them. I think that Emo's ultimate goal might be working towards a new twisted recreation of the Void Century. They're already on the hunt for Vivi, obviously. They want her specifically. And between his old best friend's corpse and Lily's ascendant, they might be trying to pull all of the pieces together to try again. They might want to recreate the final war to finish what they started centuries ago, but this time, instead of being betrayed by Joy Boy and Lily, a zombie Joy Boy and an all-imprisoned Vivi could be forced to follow Emo's exact plan this time around. Let me share something with you. For a long time now, some very strange lines from the Gorosei and Emo have kind of caught my attention, because sometimes they just do seem unquestionably evil, right? But some of the other times, they do seem somewhat committed to the stability and balance of the world. As we've heard in Vegapunk's message, there's a ton of moral ambiguity going on with the original war in the Void Century, and it's possible that from their perspective, Emo is actually the good guy here. In their mind, they're not destroying the world or enslaving it, they're just cleansing it. In my video on the true purpose of Marijoa, I talked about how the Holy Knight's temple in Marijoa called Shangara might be named after the Tibetan Buddhist spiritual kingdom of Shambhala in mythology. And if we look at the religious concept of Shambhala, it really seems like Emu is trying to make exactly that happen. It's a spiritual kingdom where humanity is ruled over by the gods, just like the celestial dragons rule over humanity right now from the land of the gods. And Shambhala is set to usher in a new golden age in which the final avatar of Vishnu will be reincarnated, Vishnu, known as the Preserver, one who preserves cosmic order. Here's a little bit of Hindu mythology for you. So, he is one of the three deities making up the so-called Trimurti. There's Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and then Shiva, the destroyer. Now, the other two already sound like aspects of Nika that we've heard about before, creation and destruction. Vishnu, meanwhile, sounds like Emu. The world government is always talking about preserving stability of the world, maintaining its balance, and they quite literally might be, as we talked about in this video, preserving Joy Boy's body. Now, in Hinduism, Vishnu has reincarnated into different avatars throughout history, with significant ones including Rama, Krishna, and even the Buddha himself. But at the end of that age, he's set to reincarnate his final avatar, Kalki, within Shambhala, ushering in the age of truth when humanity is ruled by the gods, the most virtuous age before the dissolution of the universe. This is actually also tied to a concept, and I'm very sorry to my Indian audience, I'm gonna slaughter this word. Prakrita Pralaya. Prakrita Pralaya. Prakrita Pralaya, which is a great reset and cleansing represented by, and you would have never guessed it, a giant freaking flood. Imu has ushered in an era where humanity is ruled now by the gods, the celestial dragons. They want to cause a great cleansing by enacting a giant flood, and the One Piece world is filled with prophecy. It said that Joy Boy will bring a new dawn. The Harley text predicts the next world, the third and then the fourth world. I think it's completely possible that Imu isn't working against the prophecy, but trying to fulfill it just in the most wrong and twisted way possible. Imu wants to destroy and recreate the world by flooding it and then rebuilding it in their own ideal image, and they may have kept Joy Boy, an incarnation of Nika, the sun god of creation and destruction, to help him do just that. But at the same time that Luffy has now been kind of reincarnated as a version of Joy Boy and Nika in order to fulfill this same old age prophecy, I kind of believe that Imu's working to fulfill this prophecy, but without the proper knowledge for it, rather than Luffy's, who's just a destructive force of nature, kind of unaware of the cosmic and global implications of what he's doing. So to Imu, Luffy might just be a knockoff version of Joy Boy awakening his fruit, but being nothing compared to the real deal, the man that Imu once knew. And this is where the Kage Kage no Mi really comes in. The government has never really shown interest in getting Law's fruit, ever. Imu is already immortal, whether by the Ope Ope no Mi or by some other means connected to the Abyss or something, and they also don't want to personality swap themselves into Joy Boy's body either. No, they specifically sent Doflamingo after Moria, so Imu might want to revive a zombie Joy Boy in order to accomplish this great reset and usher in a new age with this giant flood. So both Imu and Luffy may be working to fulfill the same fate in extremely opposite ways. Imu forcibly returning the old Joy Boy, while Luffy is of course the true reincarnation of Nika. If Imu unleashes the national treasure onto the world, the final fight of One Piece could very well be Luffy versus a reincarnated and controlled Joy Boy, the battle to decide the true Nika. And while I do think that either Joy Boy or his hat could be top contenders here, there is one more very strong option for the national treasure that I still have to acknowledge here too, and it's all because Imu finally decided to leave the flower room and get into the action themselves on Elbaf. And may I remind you that when they possessed Gunko, they didn't summon a big hat or a dead body to their side. Instead, they whipped up a magical dark grimoire in true Black Clover fashion, I guess, and this thing does seem to really check all the boxes too, but it's just kind of hard to say for sure because there's still so much we don't know about the Abyss as this new third power system in the series. But the book definitely makes sense in the Doflamingo discovering department. He'd have to really be searching through the recesses at Marijoa to get to that hat freezer, but if Wapol was stealthy enough to, catch Imu in action, I can definitely see a world where either he saw Imu actively using the book or just somehow snuck in somewhere and found it unattended and just read it because it's a book and you can just open it. And I mean, yeah, out of all of our options, a book that presumably, has written instructions would definitely be the easiest to figure out how it works. Imu's grimoire and abyssal powers in general might be a very dark reflection of Nika's sun in the same way that the Nika-based powers seem to cause rapid aging. It could be the exact same thing for Imu's grimoire. All of Imu's abilities might drain their lifespan away, whether it's Domi reversing a giant or summoning a cool shotgun. All of that might also take years of a user's life, but Imu might have gamed the system because if they're already immortal, then they can use the grimoire's powers without having a proper limit, which could be why their powers seem to be so broken, because they kind of found a loophole here. But there is one thing that kind of makes me question that option, because it doesn't quite make sense to me that one of the powers of the book is then to grant immortality and eternal youth to a bunch of other people, because if that's the loophole that allows Imu to use the book in the first place, then how is it the central ability of the Devil's contracts that they use the book to make? If you know what I mean, right? I mean, a very popular idea in the fandom is that Imu was once the recipient of the Ope Ope no Mi's perennial youth operation. totally unrelated to the powers of the grimoire itself, but if you go back and read chapter 1086, when Ivankov drops Imu's full name, I totally remember them speculating that it was the immortality surgery, being why Imu would still be alive all these years after the Void Century. But only that when I went and checked, it turns out that's not what they actually said. All that Eva really says is that it said that the means to create everlasting life exists in this world. And I think the community's headcanon, including mine, just swung automatically all the way to the Ope Ope no Mi, because that was the immortality method that we knew about at that time. But now we've seen that others exist, like the contracts that Imu makes with the Holy Knights. It could be that Imu's immortality also comes from the grimoire or the abyss, not from the Ope Ope no Mi. There's just no way to know for sure at this point in the story until someone actually tells us. But we have seen what happens when one of those devil contracts is actually broken, because when Imu strips Saturn of their Gorosei status, what happens? All those years of immortality are just taken away, and Saturn aged centuries in an instant, decaying into a skeleton and dust right before our own eyes. It just perfectly lines up with the idea of rapid aging being the cost of utilizing the abyssal powers, especially when you don't have Imu's protection from it. So if Dofi first learned about the book's condition of draining one's lifespan, and then he learned about the Ope Ope no Mi's ultimate power, he could then definitely have been drawing a direct line between needing the immortality in order to claim and use this book for himself. And it would also answer why he specifically pointed out the personality swapping ability, because if he didn't make himself immortal, he could also just swap his own personality into Imu's immortal body, achieving the same end result. Either power could work in his favor. And then of course, it also really well meets the requirements for shaking the world to its core, because it probably wouldn't be great for the world government's PR department if everyone found out the world was ruled by a bunch of immortal demons using black, like sacrilegious magic. So even though there are still some questions here, Imu's book definitely kind of ticks all the boxes to me. And if Imu's able to do all the crazy busted stuff we already see with that grimoire, then I kind of fear for what they might be able to do with an abyssal summoning circle the size of, well, let's say the entire One Piece world, because bridge piece. Imu may be planning to turn the entire One Piece world into a massive magic circle, and the way that they could be doing this is by using these giant country-sized bridges. Tequila, rum, vodka, and bourbon Wolf have remained a massive mystery to the One Piece fandom for many years at this point, but I think I may have just cracked the code to these insane construction projects that have been going on for literal centuries. I think that these massive pathways will help Imu take over the entire world, and my thought process all starts with this symbol, the mark of the Holy Knights. When it was first revealed that Shanks had this mark in chapter 1152, I got a little bit suspicious. I kept looking at it and I kind of wanted to know why it looked so familiar and really what it all meant, right? Symbology is really important in One Piece, and Oda is all about that stuff, so all major factions have symbols at this point, from Jolly Rogers for the pirates to the world government, and all of these symbols carry some pretty large weight, kind of like my bench press. No? Alright, I didn't think that was gonna land either, but I gotta try. So, what does this symbol have to do with the 4 giant bridges? I've got you, don't worry. What I've deducted with my excellent detective skills is that this logo looks like a perfect cross, and I recently made a video about it where I said that it reminds me a lot of the markings for Earth in our own solar system symbol list. It is the very same cross, but with a circle around it. And so I had hypothesized that by looking at it from space, the One Piece world would form a perfect circle, and it would be bisected by the Grand Line and the Red Line, forming this very symbol. But then I realized that maybe, just maybe, it's even more visibly apparent than just that. Because the 4 enormous country-sized bridges might just form the ring around the world, and then when you overlay the Red Line on top of the Grand Line, you just get this symbol. You may not have realized that that creates a new problem I need to now solve for you, which is, how do I know that these bridges are even placed to do this? And then a follow-up question, why would that even matter if that were to be the case? And yeah, well, those are pretty fair questions, dude. Let's start with the how, and then I'll explain the why to you. And honestly, I'm just kind of using some logical deduction at this point. We do know that Tequila Wolf, which was the first bridge we ever learned about, was confirmed to be in the East Blue, and that somewhere else in the world we have 3 other similar bridges, Vodka, Rum, and Bourbon Wolf as well. We have actually already seen 2 of them, as during the Roger Pirate flashback in chapter 967 we do see one of them, and then Oda later confirms in SBS volume 111 that they did not see Tequila Wolf, and since we've seen Robin go to Tequila Wolf during the time skip, we've got 2 of our 4 that we've already seen. And well, considering that with Tequila Wolf, one of the 4 of them is in one of the 4 blues, the most logical conclusion, I hope you agree, would be that these other 3 are also in the 3 other blues. And I guess we can also assume that they have a major purpose now, which is preparing for the big floods during the final war, you know, the one that's happening pretty much right now. I mean, Ivankov even suggested that this might be why they're being built during the Vegapunk message, and I actually kind of think so as well. When you really think about it, it seems very natural that the world government would make these high-rise bridges as they prepare for entire islands to vanish and sink under the water. Especially when you consider that this world is usually traversed by ship. That's the main means of transportation here. And at first, it does seem a little bit odd to need these massive giant pathways across the ocean, but seeing as Emu isn't a big fan of pirates, as we kind of figured, and wants to control the flow of, well, everything, forcing society to use these roads would let them actively control where anyone goes at any time. And I mean, that makes good sense and all, but I do just believe that there is another reason that they're being built too, and it's to help Emu finally take over the One Piece world for good, because they haven't quite managed to do that yet. Okay, you're probably wondering at this point, how? And it's pretty simple actually. I think that this formation helps create a planet-sized magic circle for Emu that they can use. I mean, at this point, we have seen Emu use these types of circles with the Abyss to teleport people, activate Domi Reversi on really powerful people like the Giants, and even summon deadly weapons, and I do think that all of this might be hinting at their big, grand goal. If you want me to spell it out for you, it does seem to me like Oda might just be trying to pull a Full Metal Alchemist here, to the extent that Emu, with their abyssal magic, could be using the Red Line, the Grand Line, and these massive bridges to create a world-sized abyss marking to do something absolutely insane. Don't believe me? It does sound a bit wild, I get it, but let's face it, the formation of it does work out pretty perfectly. As you see here, if the bridges do form the outer rings of this Earth symbol when you lay them all out, you then have a center point that lies right on top of Pangaea Castle and the Eve Tree, or I guess if you wanted to flip the Earth on Reverse Mountain. We do know this because, well, Marijoa is placed directly on the opposite side of the planet of Reverse Mountain on the Red Line, and it's directly above Fishman Island, which, as we know, is a place that Joy Boy failed previously according to the poneglyphs, and, by the way, also a place destined to be destroyed by Luffy one day. And since the Eve Tree provides light to Fishman Island, we do know that it would have to go through the Red Line up to Marijoa, or at least it is somewhere inside of the Red Line, below the Holy Land, and above Fishman Island, where we basically only see its giant roots. So that means that we know that all of these crazy important objects and places are in one big center point, and seeing as Marijoa is stated to be at the center of the world, end quote, I think it's very safe to assume that this is the marking point for the center intersection of the Red and the Grand Line, and that Reverse Mountain is on the opposite side. And all of this matters because that means that on top of this massive mark would be Emu inside Pangaea Castle, right at the center of everything. And in case you didn't notice, Emu loves ripping these crazy magic circles out left and right. When Emu appears in Elbaf, they summon a magic book and start slinging spells that all have these circular markings. That's also how the Abyss magic stuff summons the Holy Knights and the Gorosei, which I think we can pretty confidently say has directly to do with Emu's magic abilities due to the shared symbols and the fact that all the Holy Knights revere Emu directly. And actually, I do want to double down on something that I think also gets looked over a ton in the story by a lot of people, which is crazy considering it's so obvious how Oda was setting it up when you really look back at it. What I'm talking about is that the Gorosei have always been connected to these magic circles, as they are all over the Room of Authority during the Gorosei's first introduction in chapter 233. In other words, Oda has been wanting us to see the importance of these magic circles, and despite not really using them until the Egghead Island arc, it is very clear that Imo and the Gorosei using them has been an official part of Oda's grand plan the entire time ever since they first were introduced. And so what's to say that these giant bridges, another really odd element that Oda has been teasing the importance of for many years, that by the way have been built ever since the Void Century for literally hundreds of years, aren't in a very similar spot. It does feel like they may all be connected, and I think that their placement is the key to why they exist. Because if they line up how I think they might, then suddenly the Abyss's magic circle wouldn't just be a little tiny mark or, you know, the size of a giant castle floor. It would cover literally the entire planet. But admittedly, we do know that the symbol isn't necessarily specifically the same Abyss mark, because it's said that the Abyss marking is what allows the Holy Knights to teleport, and we do know that this mark is technically different looking than this very specific Holy Knight symbol, since we can see what appears to be an actual Abyss mark on Summer's elbow when he first appears in the story. But still, I do think that this symbol, the one on Shanks' elbow and all of the Holy Knight's armbands, has a much more diabolical purpose. Because to me, it could mean that Oda is using it to foreshadow the giant earth marking that Imo has been building for literally hundreds of years across all the oceans, and we've finally seen what it might be able to do. Now, I don't know about you, but it kind of seems to me like Imo has this enslave the entire world kind of vibe going on as a villain. Not sure if you'd agree, they seem to be a little bit of a control freak maybe, at least when you dig into what their actual actions have been. And let's just list some of them off, shall we? They restrict knowledge from the entire world, they use the Marines and the Holy Knights to force kingdoms to act and behave in certain ways, as was revealed by Herald in chapter 1153 when he remarks that the world government is preventing him from making relations with other kingdoms. Imo also hired the world's premier scientist, Dr. Vegapunk, to build a bunch of insane tech, including the Mother Flame, all for some other big giant devilish purpose. And then combine all of this with the fact that they refer to themselves as a god, and it's kind of the perfect recipe in my opinion for someone trying, you know, to rule the world in a very specific controlling manner. Well, let's take this a step further even, because we do know that it's the ancient weapons that have been causing these giant floods, and that Imo can destroy entire kingdoms and islands and raise the sea level basically at will now, yeah? So what if all of this is just part of their big master plan? The idea would be that Imo forces society to move up higher and higher up to the level of these massive bridges, and then they can activate a massive magic circle that enslaves the entire world in a massive Domi Reversi. And I think the reason that they'd have to be up on the same level is that it's a relatively flat marking that's only been shown to be on perfect leveled surfaces so far in the story. But I also think that, as you'll see in just a moment here, there might be a few delays or additional conditions that require the world to fully flood first before this plan can be fully put into action. And actually, speaking of flood prep here, it does seem like the Raja pirates may have also realized that this could be the big plan, which then helps back up the ideas I've been discussing today, because I've talked about it before, but really take a minute to look at what all these pirates chose to do after they made it to Laugh Tale and uncovered the actual true history of the world. Let's start with Rayleigh, who started a business where he coats ships with bubbles so that they can survive underwater. Then we have Crocus, who built an entire island inside of a whale, and then Scarborough moved to Elbaf, the single largest island in the world with a massive tree that pierces the literal heavens. Heck, I mean, Odin tried to break down the walls of Wano, which we found out would release a massive warship in the form of Pluton. And this somehow even actually lines up with the idea that Spencer here, the intelligence officer of the Raja pirates, is actually secretly Big News Morgan's, something that I've been speculating for a while now, and now that we know the Raja's crew official roles, that makes even more sense. And in case you forgot, it's the dude that lives in a literal flying ship. It kind of sounds perfect for avoiding the surface world, which is at risk of being completely submerged. Long story short, it's been a theory of mine for a while now that Morgans was the one who turned Roger into the Pirate King through the use of his newspaper in an effort to help change Imo's control over the world by creating a new pirate era. Which would, by the way, also line up perfectly with why Morgans also specifically made it so that Gear 5 Luffy was on the new bounty poster. And I mean, mean, come on, look at the duck head of him on Roger's crew. It is giving big bird energy, right? I mean, I personally think so at least, but you know, maybe this is for another time. Then we also have Shanks, who actively recruited an entire broken crew of specifically non-devil fruit users who wouldn't drown, and did so after he went up to Marijua, finding out a lot of stuff. And considering that his family is like the Holy Knight family, and we do know that the Holy Knights are familiar with Imu's plans, I wouldn't be surprised if Shanks learned all of this from Garling or even the Gorosei directly. But also, Roger did whisper something to him before his death and breaking up the crew, and so maybe the crew explained it to him before he went up there. The jury is still out on that one, but I'm sure we'll find out sooner than later. All we do know is that the Roger pirates learned how to counteract some of the abyss powers, as Scarpa Gaban showed off the ability to cancel out, you know, Summer's regeneration, and they all seem to prepare to avoid the surface world in some way, shape, or form through different means. So I don't know, but to me it sounds like someone's trying to avoid being around for Imu's massive magic circle plan after the world has been flooded. But Manu, why wait? Why not just do all that right now? And yes, there is a little bit of a weird quirky thing going on with Imu's plan at this point. It does seem like Imu is incredibly powerful, so why in the world would they need a magic circle anyways? And why wouldn't they just make one right now? And well, technically there are a few reasons why this could be the case. I mean, for one, it may be that scale is the biggest factor. Imu can toss out small to medium-sized magic circles through their own power, but we all know it's a pretty classic anime trope that scale is a really important and big thing. So in order to unleash an ability on a really wide and large area, like, I don't know, a planet, it would possibly require a circle that Imu simply doesn't have the ability at this point to create out of thin air. And this would make a ton of sense too, since the bridges at the center of this theory have been under construction for now over 700 years. Meaning that Imu started their construction pretty soon after the end of the Void Century and their big battle with Joy Boy, their last major defeat or roadblock. And so it would seem that Imu has kind of just been preparing for these bridges to be finished the entire time in order to then do something. All they need is to finish building the bridges first though, but as we've seen, construction is kind of going slow, so maybe they need a little bit more manpower, or should I say big manpower, giant power? Yeah, I mean, those bridges could directly be the reason why Imu thinks right now that the giants are the key for them to win the final war. I mean, Gunko literally stated to us that Imu thinks the giants will help determine who wins the final battle, and this may be exactly why and how. They are incredibly advanced builders. We learned this in chapter 1153 as well, as the people remarked that the giants of Elbaf specifically have advanced building techniques. But not just that, they're just straight up the oldest living civilization with crazy, weird, advanced gadgets like light roads that they sail on and the rainbow stuff and whatnot. Elbaf's people, as well as their capacity to build, could just be the thing that Imu truly needs to finally complete the bridge, like, pattern, the 4 bridges. And that could be exactly what they wanted Harold to work under them for, and why they're currently overthrowing Elbaf now and not previously. And actually adding on to why Imu couldn't just pull the trigger immediately, it could be that the flood is essential for this plan to even work. I mean, come on, you do know that Imu has a ton of connection to the ocean itself, like their name, Imu being the reverse of Umi, the word for ocean in Japanese, so maybe it's some equivalent exchange sort of deal where the water needs to get converted into something, or maybe the amount of water in the world somehow directly ties to Imu's power level. I mean, it does line up with Imu being the Sea Devil, a thing that has floated around for a long while now. And the idea there is that Imu's name backwards is again Umi, the word for sea and ocean, plus consider that design is very reminiscent of the Umibozu, a famous ocean yokai in Japanese mythology known for sinking ships and taking sailors. And this idea is even doubled down on during Sabo's raid of Marijua, as Imu begins to grow and transform into a shape that does resemble the Umibozu pretty much perfectly. So this definitely lines up with them being the enemy of Joy Boy, the first pirate, the first person who's freely saved the ocean, but also it kind of falls in line with the entire abyss power idea. A deep, endless ocean with deep, bottomless holes like Enies Lobby in Lulusia does kind of sound like an ocean god creating deeper holes to an abyss at the bottom of the ocean to me. So from that perspective, raising the ocean and the water levels does make a ton of sense then, and these giant bridges, while forming some massive circle, could be part of their big plan to not only pull off a grand magic attack, but also just control the few remaining citizens that survived their massive purge. And when you consider that the various definitions of the word abyss directly refer to regions of hell, catastrophes, and even just political differences, Emu channeling a power known as the abyss does speak a lot to their character. I mean, they are the evil king of the world, and they have, these dark satanic powers, and, are busy trying to bring about this great calamity. And so to me, all of these things kind of speak to this idea, and I just want to know what the actual catastrophe is gonna be, and I do think that this next idea might seem the most promising, because what if it's actually even crazier than just that? Like, what if this isn't a circle used to activate a power or to convert the ocean into something else? What if it straight up is a giant summoning circle? Yeah, I do think that there is a good chance that Emu needs to raise the sea levels and create a massive circle so that they can unleash a great hidden power that is hidden deep in the abyss that they draw their power from. Now, I don't think that Oda's about to say, hey, there's a massive demon hiding inside of the One Piece world, but I do kind of think that that's exactly what Oda may be implying. Like, literally look at the mural again and tell me that this isn't screaming to you, giant dark evil creature gets unleashed and destroys the first world, the second world, the third world. I mean, we have a giant dragon, the serpent, the giant demon with the forbidden sun in their hand. All these three creatures are unbelievably big compared to the other creatures in this mural. I mean, the giants of Elbaf think that this thing is massive, and I mean, compare them to the giants, the giant robot and the ancient giant in the mural, or what might even be Zunisha here. These dark entities are colossal, like almost titans. Hell yeah, finally figured out how the ancient titan thing works in the series, so we've been speculating about that for a while too. If you know, you know, if you watch the videos. Sorry, it's a little bit of a personal theory of mine I've been pushing for a while. Anyhow, what if the dark entity that we see in the mural isn't actually Emu, but instead the being that Emu draws their power from? I mean, remember, for Film Red, Oda said that a thing like Todd Musica, the giant demon monster that gets summoned, is something that kind of exists in a way in the real One Piece story at some point. And what if this demonic creature is actually hidden away in the abyss, or it's literally named the Abyss? Whether that's some magical dark plane of existence or deep inside the world itself, there is a really good chance that a giant creature that Luffy needs to defeat is hidden somewhere, and Emu may use the bridges to finish their summoning circle to finally bring it forth. This would also explain why it hasn't just been summoned yet, and it's because the Mother Flame and bridges aren't done yet to finally create the circle necessary to draw it out. Now, we do know that the Eternal Flame that the Ancient Kingdom had is nowhere to be found at this point, and Vegapunk needed to recreate something like it in the form of the Mother Flame. So if that technology is part of the summoning ritual and the circle is required, then Emu is kind of on the cusp of finishing it right now. But not only that, I also want to draw your attention to the fact that the Eve Tree is just right at the center of this all too. The fact that Emu is so determined to conquer Elbaf, home of the Atom Tree, and lives on top of the literal Eve Tree right now just can't be a coincidence, right? Unless it is, and well, that would kind of suck for this video. No, I think there may be some secret thing going on with this as well, and I'm not sure. It could be that the Sunlight Eve Tree is gonna serve as a core or center for the ritual that Emu wants to perform, or it's connected to the Forest God and the Forest God unleashing the demons and the devils, and that could be connected to that giant creature. Again, I'm not quite certain yet how it will fully tie into things here. All I know, it's very suspicious, and suspicious is normally very freaking important in One Piece. Now, if you're still asking me what I'm thinking here, personally, I would suspect that it's tied to the symbolism of Nika being Adam and Emu being Eve. I mean, these two potential lovers were then the dawn of society, but one was corrupted by the devil. And I do think that there is something there with Emu being the pawn of the abyssal devil and living on top of the Eve Tree, which could just directly be the source of devil fruits themselves. I'm not certain yet, but that sounds like something that could make sense. But honestly, it doesn't even fully matter because the plan may already be in motion. The Mother Flame is done, and now the bridges need to get built completely for Emu's master plan to finally start. This could be turning the entire world into demons, it could be summoning the abyss creature to the surface, which might just be, the demons that they might be drawing their powers from. Emu may not be the sea devil after all. Maybe this thing is and they're calling it forth. Maybe Imu is summoning it every time they want to reset the world and then it goes back to slumber. I mean, the true enemy of Nika, the true enemy of Joy Boy, and the true enemy of Luffy could be this thing. And so the One Piece world right now might lie at a literal cross-section of chaos and peace, which might just also be the cross-section of tequila, vodka, rum, and bourbon wolf. But hey, that's just a theory, and One Piece theory. Nah, I'm just messing with you. It's a fun idea, and I do think we'll be learning a lot from, the upcoming chapters. A lot of crazy stuff been happening recently. I mean, we now know what rocks looks like. But honestly, the more we learn about Imu's great master plan and all the weird locations that, surround the Red Line and the government structures, the more I also get confused about something else that's really close to this: the Florian Triangle. Ironically enough, the biggest mystery to me in all of One Piece. A story filled with thousands of years of lost history, a guy that can eat 2 devil fruits, and oh yeah, the One Piece that has haunted me for over 10 years now is actually this single page right here in chapter 490. And I think with everything that we've recently learned about Davy Jones and ancient giants and Emu turning people straight into giant demon monsters, I think it's a good time right now to take another crack again at solving this eternal mystery. What are these giant creatures here? And I think most importantly, I should probably catch you up to speed on the Florian Triangle in general, since it's easy to forget all the crazy stuff if you're not super locked in on it like I've been recently. So, the Florian Triangle is, as the name suggests, based on the real-world Bermuda Triangle. But something that I don't think is known as much by people and is pretty relevant for you and me today is that the Japanese kanji for this place labels it as the Devil's Triangle, which is very different. Which also, fun fact, is something that we do call the Bermuda Triangle in the real world too, depending on where you're from. But as for the Florian Triangle, in the story, it's this really creepy and grimy place full of mystery, darkness, and spiritual nonsense going on. A ton of ships vanishing here, death becoming those who enter it, and worst of all, Gecko Moria. I mean, just look at the guy, yike. I do love Oda's weird designs, but this dude just makes me wriggle in my skin a little bit, I gotta say, which I guess is the point. But his young design is very cool, and looking back, I'm kind of imagining how sick Thriller Bark might have been with Prime Moria instead of, Tubby Moria. But anyhow, that's not the point of this video, I digress. The Florian Triangle is home to a lot of oddities, like Brook and the ghost ship Thriller Bark, and our big subject for today, of course, these guys. First appearing in chapter 490, these giant creatures wander the Florian Triangle and dwarf pretty much everything else in the series in terms of size. Well, maybe with the exception of Big Man Zunisha here. I mean, that dude is also big. And so I've always really wondered what these things were, because they make no sense, and we literally have never gotten anything close to a real explanation for them. They do seem to be these truly titanic beasts, massive shadows with piercing blood red eyes that delve deep into the souls of those who haunt them. Now, I mean, they're just red eyes, but I definitely would imagine that that's what people say if they do see them, which isn't very common, because apparently these things love collecting pirate ships, or just ships in general. They crush them, killing or vanishing crews left and right, and during the month that Thriller Bark takes place in the story, 14 ships have already gone missing in the Florian Triangle within just 30 days. Now, a lot of people tend to think that these guys are just a fun little mystery that Oda has thrown in for the fun of it, but when has anything in the story at this point ended up not being hugely important, literally hundreds or thousands of chapters later? Right, never. Everything is relevant, it seems. So, of course, I do think that Gecko Moria was snatching up some people here too, but people were going missing long before he ever pulled in with Thriller Bark from the West Blue. Now, to be fair, it's never really been clear how long that is, but the story kind of frames it out to be an urban legend for decades or even centuries, and with One Piece, anything weird and mysterious from the past is, typically gonna be tied into one key event. You know what's coming. No, it's the Void Century. Now, I am saying that something happened during the Void Century, or maybe even earlier during the First World, that might have created the Florian Triangle. Well, yes, I absolutely am. But I'm not 100% certain, obviously, but it very much seems very likely when you really take a look at these creatures and how Oda specifically draws them. So, What do I mean by that? Well, straight up, look at them and then look at this picture right here. Yeah, I mean, they do look pretty near identical to a Japanese yokai known as the Umibozu. This part is absolutely nothing new to you if you're a diehard One Piece theory head. That's been speculated about a lot before, so if this is you, give me a little bit more time to cook with things and get everyone else up to speed, because the Umibozu is a yokai or Japanese evil spirit that haunts the oceans. What adds to its mystery is that not too much is known about the origin of this legend of the Umibozu, but it does have multiple sightings throughout Japan and Japanese history. These giant shadowy beasts do appear to sailors who are just chilling out on calm seas in the dark until suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the seas quickly turn into a nightmare. The Umibozu appears, often at night, and the first sight is just this giant black bozu head, and then they just start crushing ships like it's no one's business. Interestingly, sometimes they do appear in a group, not too dissimilar to the ones that we see in the Florian triangle right here, or they can just appear solo. And they're known to even ask for buckets or barrels of water to drown its enemies, and the only way you can defeat one is to offer it an endless bucket or unlimited barrel so that you can confuse it and get the hell out of Dodge right there. And I'm not gonna beat around the bush, this does seem at that point what Oda was going for, absolutely, for these creatures. But I also think, far from the first one to talk about this, but I do think there is a lot more going on here. First off, I think that these creatures might also be drawing some of their presence and inspiration and design from the very famous eldritch horrors like Cthulhu. You probably know him best. Now, don't worry about it. I don't think that these beasts are actually Lovecraftian big nightmare horrors from universes beyond, even though that would be very cool. I just think that their design and mystery somehow elicit some of the same things. You know, the eldritch horrors are beings that you can't comprehend with your mere human mind when you look at them. Their forms are too twisted and otherworldly for a regular person to perceive, and their silly little brains just can't handle them. But not you and me. We can see it on the page because we are absolutely goated. The biggest thing is that they come from a crack deep under the ocean, a place that leaks out this icky darkness onto the world, and oftentimes the Bermuda Triangle is tied to this crack, and, you know, maybe eldritch horrors are tied to it too. At least that's what all the conspiracy subreddits I'm on say. You know, take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so we've got two big inspirations for what they could be, but surely before I go all in on the dark and twisted stuff, there has to be a potential other explanation for them too, right? Nope, you're wrong. It has to be demons. I'm just messing with you. There's totally another idea that could explain these big old creepy guys. We actually have possibly even seen them sort of in the story another time, because there are these big dark creatures, you know, the dragon, the standing demon, and the hellflame serpent on the mural in chapter 1138, shadowy beasts of titanic size. They kind of definitely fit the bill here, especially the one on the left holding the sun. He's giving me very big Florian vibes, but based on how we see them appear, I do think you could also make a really cool case for us misinterpreting what these things really are, because they could actually be the big spines of something. And that glowing red thing, well, it might just be the deep hell flames glowing through the cracks of these spines, maybe. I don't know, you know in those Godzilla movies when he's just like swimming through the water all casually and you see the iconic back spines of him breaking through the water? Or when giant beasts are hibernating and then they start moving and you realize the mountains the characters are on are actually the back of a gigantic beast? What? It could be something like that. Not the first time it would fit into anime, and Godzilla, the entire thing, that is Japanese. But I do think that the Florian Triangle being an actual prison or place that the Hellflame Serpent has been locked up would be pretty cool if that were to be true. And before we move on to all of the other crazy emu stuff that you know is coming, I did want to toss out my personal headcanon that these things are the ancient titans from a long forgotten era of the world. I did make a very big mega theory on that a few months back. I just love the idea that titans, you know, like the big head that we get on Onigashima, used to rule the One Piece world before the gods of One Piece did, and so, hey, maybe these are the last remaining Titans. You never know.
Titans! I wasn't joking about the Titans! Heed my warning!
There is a lot of hints that they might exist. Different video, we're gonna link that below. Alright, with that out of the way though, it is emu time now. And let's face it, when you do see these things and you see emu, they gotta be besties, right? They're basically twins. They literally look so darn similar, it's kind of hard to not just immediately tie them together. Shadowy body, same red eyes maybe, especially when we see Emu transform into a giant beast even more similar to these shadows as they attempt to attack Sabo. Like, that big Emu there is kind of oozing Florian triangle monster energy. You kinda gotta admit that. And that should make a lot of sense if you've ever watched some of my videos on that topic or any others in the community. Like, the idea that Emu is based on the Umibozu as well is nothing exactly new or revolutionary. A lot of it is derived from the idea that Emu's name is Umi, ocean backwards, you know, the Japanese words for the ocean. And this, along their design and the fact that the Gorosei's true forms are all also based off of different yokai and other mystical Japanese beasts, you know, creates a pretty sound argument, I think, for Emu being tied to the Umibozu and thus tied to these creatures right here. And considering now we have seen Emu burst out crazy dark magic and devil spells and be in full demon mode, them having ties to a place literally called the Devil's Triangle in the official Japanese version of One Piece just makes a lot of sense to me, at least, especially when you consider, again, how Oda chooses to draw Emu. I mean, we've even gotten this dang plushie based on Emu's shadow design, so either we've been all wrong and this is just straight up what Emu looks like, or this silhouette will somehow be really important to their design at some point. Which, you know, would work if their dark evil power allows them to transform into an Umibozu. And I actually do quickly want to point out something else that does tie potentially Emu to these beasts, and it's the arc that they all appear in. As I called out before, the Florian Triangle is of course part of the thriller Bark Arc. Bark Arc. Try saying that one 3 times fast. Love it. Anyways, I think it makes a ton of sense to have this supernatural area of the ocean focused on pirates, tall tales, and the spooky nature tied to the Halloween and, you know, the entire freaking zombie arc. I love when Oda chooses to blend things like that together to cover a whole subculture of piracy and subgenre of media in the series, matching that together in the story, but this tie goes a little bit deeper than just that. You see, Gecko Moria, we talked about him, the main villain of this arc, at least to me, does seem to foreshadow Emu's powers almost one-to-one. We have talked about this idea before on the channel, but it seems like a lot of pre-timeskip arcs obviously have deep ties and parallels to different arcs post-timeskip, you know, like how a ton of Skypiea stuff seem to appear in Wano again. For today though, the biggest ones are Moria and Emu. Moria's shadow possession, his ability to force undead and even living beings to work under him by stealing their shadows and putting new ones in, is kind of nightmare fuel if he wasn't such a goofy character. But it's also oddly similar to the Domi Reversi technique that Emu uses to turn people into demons that then have to fight for them. Now, it could be a coincidence, for sure, but I do like to think that it was Oda directly hinting at what the big bad guy would eventually be able to do in the story, and so considering that Emu looks like these beasts that appear in this arc, and Emu's powers seem to be foreshadowed in this arc too, this tie-in between Emu and the beasts is at least a lot deeper than just appearance. Then of course we have the entire Moria Thriller Bark thing foreshadowing rocks, and like obviously rocks right now is very relevant with the Emu connection that we're getting in Elbaf, but what if I told you that I think the tie-in is like literally much deeper, as in like 20,000 leagues under the sea levels deeper? And yes, I do know that that reference technically doesn't work if you're a book nerd. Let me have this one. It kind of landed for most people, I hope. I wanted to talk about the idea that the Florian Triangle isn't just some odd spot on the ocean, but in reality, it's a prison or a containment field for these beasts so that they can't escape. And not only that, it's keeping something else way deeper underwater as well. Now you might remember that I have teased this idea with the Hellflame Serpent earlier, but this Florian Triangle could actually be a sealed place for the Abyss itself, the place that Emu straight up draws their demonic powers from. You gotta admit, it would make a lot of sense with all the creepy and ominous stuff going on that a literal void of darkness and despair is straight up under the ocean here, potentially leaking out chaos and dark monsters into the One Piece world that are then trapped within the triangle shape. And another really big idea is that they might even be the reverse version of the giant shadows from Skypiea. You know, how those were cast down and made out to be hypermassive? Well, What if the ancient beasts or titans sealed below in the abyss are casting shadows up from there? I don't know, demonic reflections of beasts sealed in a prison that Imu hid creatures in? In that way, the prison would be something made by Imu to contain a whole plethora of things beneath the Florian Triangle, like titans, some of the other gods in the One Piece world, Davy Jones, anything on the table to be creeping out into this part of the ocean at this point. And it would also explain the name of the abyss, which is a word used to describe the dark depths of the ocean, of course. As you know, I've been spitballing this idea around a lot lately, and I'd really love to see it come to fruition in the Florian Triangle specifically, and actually found something very curious when I was researching, which was this symbol right here, which is the Mu heaven symbol. Yeah, Mu. A triangle with a center dot that represents the creator's power in the Mu Lemurian symbology we're talking about, right? Especially because Imu refers to themselves as Mu. Now, Mu is a legendary lost continent, very similar to Atlantis, by the way, and was brought to fame by a famous British occult writer. It's even weaved into the Lovecraftian stuff I was talking about earlier. Yet another reason I think there is some credence to this idea, and something that would fit really nicely into the whole One Piece vibe, and that occultist thing is another nice touch for this very specific area of the series. Because it said that Mu, similar to Atlantis, may have been submerged, and that it could even be the Garden of Eden. Now, this is something we have to talk about, especially since we do know that Oda loves these types of stories as well. So, we've got a triangle-shaped part of the ocean that has beasts inside it that cannot seem to leave it and are tied to the occult, perfectly matching the symbol which represents God's seal. The triangle with a symbol reminiscent of Imu's eye in the middle does sound perfect for the Florian Triangle, and in the series, it's got a single big island in it, Thrilla Bark. But what if there was another island below it, deep underwater, sealed away in this godly symbol, the symbol of heaven? Heaven as in maybe the sun god Nika kind of heaven? Yes, this is a theory video, but I'm very much aware we're getting into very wacky territory here, but I do think it's a legitimately very cool connection that could imply that a person like Nika or like Joy Boy sealed away an entire island, possibly even Laugh Tale, just saying, that was home to Imu, the land of Mu, and that the abyss is tied to this place at the bottom of the ocean, and that's why these beasts that look like Imu wander around here. For all we know, Imu could be one of these beasts that has actually escaped it or was simply on the outside of the seal when it was made, and I kind of wonder if Imu truly stole their powers before they were sealed away by Nika, or if maybe the other way around, Imu, as I mentioned earlier, could have been the one to seal it all off to protect the area from Nika or anyone else finding it. I'm not entirely sure which way this would be yet. I mean, the Garden of Eden stuff does connect very nicely too, because that's exactly what we always see Imu be at, right? The flower room inside of heaven, which does seem to draw some direct inspiration from the mythical Garden of Eden. And of course, we have the Adam tree and the Eve tree and the devil fruits, all the biblical stuff. And I think all of this would just work really well with everything that we have currently going on in the story. We don't know much about the Abyss yet, beside its weird occult power to teleport people around the world and the implication that it's also where Imu draws their evil powers from. So it being associated with this place, known for weird occult stuff, would track pretty decently, I think. Also, let's be real, it's a very anime thing to do, to have a dark core that slowly leaks out into the world, causing problems, something that Joy Boy and Nika would probably want to seal off and prevent from spreading everywhere else. It'd be a really cool thing, I think, to imagine Nika or Joy Boy actively preventing Imu or Imu's power from becoming free, opening a whole can of worms for how they might actually be great hypocrites, and Luffy will end up breaking that seal as he's the truest and most freedom-oriented person. And something else I wanted to mention is that this wouldn't even be the first time that we've seen big giant gates associated with Imu, because Imu in chapter 1155 stands face to face with Rocksteady Zebek before he leaves and then destroys one of the gates of justice. Yes, I did want to talk about them because those things also never really made sense either and are yet another giant weird artificial triangle, like very close to the Florian triangle in the ocean. We have no idea how old either of them are or why they are where they are. Like, all that we do know is, just like the Florian triangle, it's this massive triangle formed by Imu, the ruler of the world government, with these 3 insanely titanic big gates. I guess technically we don't know even if Imu made them or if Imu just sort of hijacked them and put the world government symbol on them. My actual guess would be that they were built during the Void Century and had a very different purpose back when, you know, they were built and the sea levels were lower, and they might have just been regular gates, but then ended up under Imu's control after they took over the world. But yeah, we have 2 big mysterious triangles tied to Imu, but what does that actually have to do with what's going on in the series right now? Well, for one, if they're tied to the Abyss and have these crazy big monsters inside them, then we do know by the end of the show that these things will manage to escape. Oda isn't the type of guy who sets up plot devices and then lets them fall through. No, if he reveals a monster somewhere, it will appear and it will have to be fought. If he reveals a power source, it will be activated, and so if he reveals the Abyss is a place that creates big demons, then that will come to fruition, right? I hope. I mean, we could even potentially get an end of the series final battle with evil demon kaiju battling the forces of the world, Imu and the raw power of the Abyss versus a giant sun god Luffy, while everyone else has to defeat the various other monsters or titans destroying the world. Just saying, it would be pretty hype to see all the different crews or like groups that Luffy has teamed up with at this point, you know, pretending to be the cast of Kaiju number 8. Meanwhile, Luffy is busy duking it out big size with Blackbeard or Imu, who are controlling these dark monsters that are threatening the entire planet. But as you know, these climactic battles between good and evil are new to the One Piece world at all. The Blue Planet has been destroyed and rebuilt at least twice before, and so piecing all of the things that I've discovered through exploring all of these world government structures and their possible connections to the ancient kingdom, I've put together what I personally think is a pretty solid idea of what might have happened during the most mysterious time in One Piece, the Void Century. And if you want to watch that video, you can do that right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching to the end, which is absolutely crazy. Let me know what you think. Also, thanks to all of our fantastic Patreon members. Link to that in the description below, and I will see you in the next video.